I'll go on mute while you're talking.
Okay, we're live now, Chair.
Good evening, everybody. This is the Housing Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting for the 17th of November 2020. The first item on the agenda is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillor Churchman.
Thank you very much. Item 2 is the minutes. Does everyone approve the minutes, or has anyone got any comments they wish to make on the minutes?
No, they're fine with me.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Oh, Lynn looks like she's speaking, but it's muted.
Sorry, is there matters arising, or are you just agreeing the minutes?
Are we agreeing the minutes? Is there any matters arising?
I was just got a question on the minutes. Is that all right? Shall I do it now? On page 12, we talked about the sheltered accommodation and opening them. Carol, are they open or have they had to close again? You know, like the communal areas. Are people being able to use those in this lockdown, or are they all still locked down? They're not. They
were closed. They reopened. We're in another lockdown. They have to close again.
They're about to close again.
Yeah,
okay,
so we won't know until we know what's happening at the end of this lockdown, whether we can open them again or not.
Okay, thank you.
Brilliant. Anyone else?
No.
Brilliant. So can we approve the
Approved.
Agreed.
Excellent.
Approved.
So if we move on to item 3, I've not received any urgent items, but I would like Carol to say a few words, not about Roger, but about an even more important member of staff in the housing department that we discussed the other night. If you want to say a few words.
Oh, you mean Heather?
Yeah, Heather, yeah.
Okay, so Heather Gunn, who is the strategic lead for housing operations, is retiring at the end of this month on the 30th of November. Heather has been with the council for 38 years, since she was 16 years old, and she started working in benefits, and she has never worked anywhere else. She's worked her way up through the council, and she is a fantastic member of staff, and she's been a fantastic support to me since I came here a couple of years ago. So yes, thank you very much, Councillor Spillman. I will ensure that she watches this on YouTube so that she can hear all this.
And then we'll break formality slightly and say, can we have just a couple of claps for Heather Gunn?
Councillor Redsel's got her hand up as well, Councillor. So I don't know if you wanted to say something.
Councillor Redsel.
Thank you, Chair. It was only to say that I know Heather as well, and for a long time, and she's been a real help to me. I have put it to the Mayor to do something for her. So I've left it in his hands at the moment. So I think he will come to you, Carol, maybe, or his secretariat will come to you to get some information. So I hope that he may do something.
Okay, I'll wait for his call.
I know he will, but we don't want her to leave before we do it. So, but you say she's not leaving for a month.
The 30th of November is her last day.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to praise her because she's always helpful whenever I've been to her. There's always that comeback. And to me, that's a great thing, just to come back to councillors, I think is brilliant. So she needs to pass that on to the new person that is obviously going to take over.
I will pass that on to the new person who is going to take over.
Thank you. Cheers. Thanks, Chair.
You're on mute, Chair.
Item number 4. Have we got any declarations of interest? No, I can see no. No, we're all good. Councillor Abbas is the right way up this time. You were sideways a minute ago. You were definitely sideways. If we go and move on to item number 5, this is the first report on the agenda, and it's licensing houses of multiple occupation. Who's going to be speaking on this report?
Jalal is, but I just wanted to say, obviously, this report came about because Councillor Redsel asked for it at the last meeting. So that's just the genesis of it. But I'll hand over to Jalal to present the report.
Thank you, Carol. Can everybody hear me?
We can, but all we can see is the top of your head.
Oh, is that better?
That's better, yes.
Is that better? Oh, Thank you, Carol. Okay, well, good evening, Chair and members. I'm Dilal Ahmed. I'm the Council's Private Housing Enforcement Manager, and my report is an update on licensing for mandatory and additional licensing. As Carol said, members requested this report for information and to comment on. I'm going to assume that everyone's read the report, so I won't read out the whole report, but what I will do is highlight the report findings. Okay, so mandatory licensing applies to all shared houses let to 5 or more people who are renting a dwelling, and additional licensing applies to small HMOs let to 3 or 4 tenants in the southern parts of the borough. And this came into force on June the 1st, 2019. Planning permission is required for large HMOs, more than 6 people. Landlords who fail to license a HMO are subject to a prosecution or face a civil penalty notice up to £30,000. In terms of local housing context, HMOs represent around 4% of homes in Thurrock, and demand for HMOs has significantly increased due to housing pressures. And this accommodation type is likely to increase in the future as the population increases and there remains a shortage of affordable housing in Thurrock. HMO licensing over the last 3 years, in terms of the number of licenses granted on the HMO license register, is currently 147, and the team has collected 216,000 in licensing fees. The process involves looking at properties in terms of making sure they meet the minimum housing standards, checking that the property is suitable for the number of people living there, and we also carry out a fit and proper test that the licence holder is suitable to manage the property. And in terms of the fit and proper test, what we look at, making sure that the person who's applied for the licence is not subject to any unspec convictions relating to fraud, dishonesty, violence, sex offences, so on. We also estimate a further, can I just go back to, in terms of the report, there is a table on under section 4.8, which shows the concentration of licensed HMOs in the borough. What this shows is that HMOs are heavily concentrated in the areas of Grays, South Chafford, West Thurrock, Southern Stifford, Tilbury, Riverside and Thurrock Park. We also estimate a further 2,738 unlicensed HMOs in the borough, and there is a programme underway to inspect those properties. This excludes buildings that are exempt from licensing. If I look at table 5.2, this shows over the last 3 years the number of enforcement actions the team have carried out. And as you can see, that particular table, the team has been very robust in terms of the number of notices that the team has served, but also in terms of the number of HMOs that have been improved over that period of time. In this period, the team have issued around £101,000 in terms of civil penalty notices. Having said that, there is still some really excellent landlords in the borough providing good quality and affordable homes to residents. In terms of planning enforcement, Thurrock doesn't have an Article 4 in place, which Article 4, what that means is it doesn't restrict the right of landlords or residents to open a HMO in the borough. So when we looked at the number of HMO applications that the planning team have turned down, the total number was 5 in 2020 compared to 1 in 2019. Finally, licensing improves the management of HMOs and holds landlords accountable for improve it, accountable for property and also for their tenant actions. And this has a positive impact on the wider community. So I'm happy to take questions on the report.
Thank you very much for that. Obviously, well done for producing the report. Well done for the good work. I just wanted to go deeper into how we're going to find those 2,000 odd Hmos. If you could give us some, detail about process. And I think someone's got their mic on. Turn your mic off because I can hear the echo. There we go. And a little bit more about you've said a lot about the ones that are bad, but there's not been much said about the ones that are good. So if you could just give us a sort of breakdown of how many bad ones you found compared to good ones, would be quite nice as well. And there's a point in here about 6.3 where it says other authorities have got this extra power and this extra article. Is this something which councillors can give your department, and what's the process for that? Is it something that you would like, these extra powers, and is that possible?
Okay, thank you, Chair. So in terms of, if I go back to details of the process of how we've estimated that number, 2,738, what we did was that we did a property identification exercise. So we looked at council tax records, we looked at parking permit records, we looked at the electrical roll register. And what that generated is that properties where you had names of people, of more than 3 people living at those addresses. So from that list, we've then now merged it onto a map and then stuff. So with the map you have 3 dots, we also have a separate map in the office which highlights all the areas where those properties are located. And what's identified is that we have a high proportion of HMOs located in areas of East Tilbury, Ockenden, and we've got further HMOs in the areas of Grays and Averley, Purfleet, which those landlords in those areas haven't applied for licence applications. During this year, obviously, because of COVID, been able to go out, visit all those properties. When the restrictions ease again, we hope to go out and visit, inspect those properties. We also plan to carry out a further detailed property identification exercise with a consultant during our selective licensing consultation exercise. So we hope to identify further properties through a further check looking at corporate ownership, businesses that have purchased properties in the borough, which will also identify more properties that we can go out and inspect. So I hope that's answered that question in terms of data, where it's come from.
Yeah, rather than just hold all my 3 questions, if you hold those other 2, I'll give someone else a chance first. Wendy, who was the first one to raise a hand? Sorry, I was not paying attention.
It was Councillor Redsell, Chair.
Councillor Redsell, and then who's next?
And then Councillor Worrell, and then Councillor Abbas.
Brilliant.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the report. I know I asked for it to come only because I had some in my ward. Just to pick up on your question, Luke, you said that you go by the electoral roll. We can't always go by that because only one person usually puts their name down. I've got one in my area where 7 live in there and only 1 goes on the electoral roll. So we don't actually follow that through. It's not, I don't think it's law that you have to put down everybody. I'm not sure of that. But that's where it doesn't match up. I really just wanted, you said about 5 got turned down this year. That was, I think, 5 in one road, which was going to have 9 in each property. It would have made 34 people in one street. And I think that got picked up by me. And I think Councillor Rice picked it up as well. I just think that wherever most of the businesses that are either buying the properties or renting the properties are coming from London. So we've got that base and it's cheaper here. And I understand where people, you know, whether they're ex-offenders or whatever, they're coming here because it's cheaper to buy here than London, or it's cheaper to rent a room here in London. I just worry that we're allowing too much, where that would have been in that one street would have been 34 people, would have added, well, it wouldn't have done the street any good, I don't think. Whether some of them have got cars, you know, it would have added to the parking problems we've got now. But I've probably got a couple of other questions, Luke, but I don't want to hog it. But I just want to know how often we check some of these houses for the electrical. If they don't put themselves on the list, we've got no way of checking. I know they have to be checked every 5 years for electrical now. Just if you can enhance on some of them, I'd.
Thank you, Councillor. Going back to your question in regards to the electoral roll register, that's a requirement for people over the age of 18 to register to vote. There is a separate team within the council that go out and follow up people who fail to complete the electoral form. So in terms of you know, that
Doesn't
particular
happen.
case,
It doesn't happen. Sorry.
note it. But in terms of the data, we found a reliable source, and it's also helped our team to identify a number of unlicensed property this year.
Okay, if I can come back in later on, Luke.
You're on mute, Chair.
Councillor Worrell.
Thanks, Luke. I'll just take one question then at this point. I think that we probably could have had a really good big long debate about this. But I just wonder why we've got the local plan that's due to come back next year, and why we don't build our own HMOs where we're then in control of exactly, you know, at least some of them, we need them. Our housing list would indicate that we could house these people. The pandemic's shown that there's lots of single people that could certainly be housed in them. And I think that whilst it was given that planning committee isn't open to it, I think planning committee don't want to put 7 in one road. But, you know, if we was to put them in the right places while we're building, and of course we're building because we've got reports that come here every month for building, you know, we'd have some control and that income, because we keep going to unscrupulous landlords, and they are, some of them, I mean, I'm not going to say who it is, Luke, but you will know exactly who it is. You know, the landlords are just not nice landlords. I just wonder why we don't take a bit of control and build some of these ourselves.
Do you want to come back to that?
Yeah, Ryan, I don't know if you want to make a comment in relation to the local plan and HMOs, but in terms of HMOs and housing working very closely with the Head Start programme in children's services, and we are procuring HMO properties in the borough in certain parts, and the plan is by I believe 2023 to have all young people that are Thurrock are responsible to have them housed within the borough.
Just come back there. It's not only, sorry, it's not only about young people. At the soup kitchen that I go to and I work out on a Friday night, but out of COVID times because of like social distancing, it's not young people that turn up there. They're people like that are my age, middle-aged men, you know, that get divorced. You know, the wife normally keeps the house, the men are on the streets, the statutory duty doesn't fall, you know, their way. You know, it's not young people that are turning up there, it's middle-aged men and women. So, you know, whilst it's good for young people, and I support that, we've got to look wider across the age groups.
Yeah.
Andy's going to chip in, I think, if you want to chip in, Andy. Sid.
You muted, Andy.
Thank you. Thank you. Always a lag. As the local plan question was raised, I thought I could usefully add. As members know, we are progressing the local plan and gone through a couple of stages of consultation. Aside from the sort of general headline figures on housing number needs, and we'll come on to that on reports later on this evening, making sure that the right mix of homes are provided based on an evidence base, picking up on Councillor Worrell's point, will be absolutely key. So as we take the local plan forward and we get to greater levels of detail as the plan progresses, then looking at demand, looking at needs and future needs as well will be very much part of that work, and these sorts of conversations will be part of the mix. We're not quite there yet, but we're not too far away.
Brilliant. Councillor Abbas.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Dulard, for your report. So my question is, first, I just want to pinpoint on 2.3, you know, the West Thurrock. This is not Wet Thurrock, that's my ward. So at 2.3. So my question is, like you have mentioned, there are around 68,000 plus homes and 14.1% are privately rented, which are around 9,000 plus homes. So why do we have only 147 properties which are licensed?
Okay, Councillor, in terms of why we only have 147 properties licensed, previous to the current law change, under the law changed back in 2019. What the change was, it moved from HMOs, which were previously 3-storey high, 5 or more people required a license. The law changed back in 2019, October 2019, where properties, smaller properties, where these the number of stories became irrelevant. It was more about the number of people, which was 5, which became people sharing houses. So that's why the number, if you look at the numbers, increased over the last 3 years. We've started from a very low number, which was 5 in 27, and that if you look at table 2, in 2017-18, it went up to 18 in 2018-19, and 2019, that's where we saw the spike, where it went a bit higher in 2019-20. Now, in terms of why there is only 147, the team has raised the information to landlords and to residents about the requirement of licensing. If landlords fail to license, then it's down to the team to detect those properties. So the team increased in terms of size in 1920 to deal with the level of demand.
Brilliant. So if you just don't mind me chipping in, what I know, obviously the pandemic has affected your work, but what sort of target are you setting for, if we're here in a year's time, what sort of target are you setting for the amount of properties that will be licensed in the borough, considering, how many you think there might be?
Thank you. Well, the target is that we have to investigate that 2,738 properties. That process is carried out through a desktop exercise, but also physical checks visiting the properties. So the plan is that, where there's a requirement to license, if they fail to license, then obviously you give them advice on how to license. And if they continue to fail to license, that's when we take the decision whether we'll serve them with a civil penalty notice or take more serious action, which would be legal through the courts. At the same time, we also not only look at licensing the properties, but we also look at removing any hazards that we identify at the property. So it's a two-pronged stream that we look at.
Yeah, I
Here I have a
but I
question.
wanted to know. I mean, can we have a? Is it possible to have a KPI on this even? Because it's quite an important issue going forward. Is it possible to have a proper target that we can assess? You know, the improvement and growth of the scheme. I don't know if that's one for Carol or Roger.
Yes, I can certainly think about that when I'm setting Jalal's targets for next year. Obviously, we only set them at the beginning of the financial year, not in the middle of it. And currently, the team has a target which is around the detection of housing health and safety rating hazards. And they are trying to get back on track with that, because obviously not being able to do any visits for 6 months did quite severely impact on their ability to meet that target. So we can certainly, Jalal and I can talk about that and see what would be a reasonable target in terms of numbers or percentage increase, or whether we do that through the numbers that are licensed or the amount of income that he makes, or both. So yeah, we can talk about that.
I mean, I'm not expecting miracles. I understand that we're in difficult times, but I'd like to see some commitment that, you know, when we eventually do return to normality, that this becomes, you know, that we do get, you know, a growth target in this. I've got, how many hands up? I've got 3 hands up. Can we be very, very brief? Because otherwise we're going to be here until midnight. Joy.
Thank you, Chair. I will be brief. Just that some of these HMOs, 16-year-olds are being put in them and they've not got anybody supervising them at all. So that is another of my concerns. My other concern is there's lots of councillors who don't know what the HMOs mean. They need a little bit more knowledge on it to know whether to pick them up in their wards or not. As for Gerald, can you answer me how you go out, and if they've got to have a electrical check on their home every 5 years, who makes sure they do it every 5 years?
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I'll go back to the question regarding care homes. Last year, at the end of December, we received a grant from the Ministry of Housing to go out and inspect unregulated care homes in the borough. So the private housing team do go out, and we do go out and inspect those type of properties that you've described. And generally, those properties are the ones which are hosting children that have been placed by other local authorities that we don't necessarily know about. So that program has been very successful in terms of licensing undetected properties that we weren't aware of, and B, also working very closely with Children's Services and Essex Police in visiting those care homes together, making sure the properties, one, is safe, also two, if there are any concerns with any children that go missing from those homes. And further to that, we're doing a further exercise where we're trying to identify all corporately owned or properties that have been commercially purchased in the borough, which will also help to detect the number of HMOs and the number of unregistered care homes operating in the borough. We've also written to all the local authorities neighbouring to Thurrock for them to work more closely with us to give us the list of those properties where they're placing children in the borough. I hope that gives you some level of assurance that we are working internally, but also externally with other local authorities to improve housing conditions for young people.
So I think on that point, is it okay if you follow that one up in writing, and any further points about electrical checks? Is that okay, Joy?
Yes, fine.
Brilliant. Yeah. Councillor Worrell?
Thank you. I just wanted to look at the income of the, so it's 216,000 from licensing and £100,000 from fines. What can this money be used for specifically? Does it get swallowed up elsewhere? You know, what exactly do we spend, you know, over £350,000 on?
Councillor, I'll take that one. The money is ring fenced to Jalal's service. It cannot be used anywhere else. It is legally ring fence to Jalal service, and part of the rules around licensing are that the licensing fees that you collect have to be invested back in the service to work with landlords to improve the quality of homes, etc. So it's ring fence for Jalal service, and as Jalal pointed out, he had an increase in staffing last year, and that
I
is
was going to
paid for
ask, how
by-
many have we got in the team, Carol? How many in the team?
I tried to guess last night when Councillor Spillman asked me the same question, and I said about 16. Jalal, what's the correct answer to that question?
These 12 people within the team, Carol. Excluding me, it'd be 13. But in terms of the private housing team, there's 12.
Okay.
So, and yeah, so there were 4 additional posts brought in on a fixed term contracts, and they were made permanent earlier on this year.
So we could shoot through that 202. I'm just thinking the more we license, the more money we've got, and the more money we've got, the more staff, and the more staff, the more people we'll find.
Councillor Worrell, you and Jalal are thinking exactly the same way. That is exactly what Jalal thinks, and he would be out there finding them if he could be, and licensing them if he could be. But the point is, we have to go and visit them, and that's been particularly challenging and difficult this year because of, you know, the circumstances.
Okay, thank you. I have got others, but I'll send you an email, Jalal.
Thank you. And just to come back to in terms of the chair's question about a target, there is a target in relation to the service because the service is self-financed. So this year our target is to generate £102,000. This year, at the end of September, we've generated around about £69,000 in a very difficult year. So, but we're hoping to achieve or to exceed £102,000 by end of March.
Brilliant, thanks. I'm going to have to, I know there's people that still want to ask questions, but I've got to move on because we've got some hot topics later on that I'm sure people are going to want to get stuck into. So apologies for that. So if we can move
Chair,
on.
I have just a brief question, please. Just a brief one.
Is it okay if you put that in writing, Councillor?
Yeah, that's fine.
We really do. Apologies, I wouldn't do this normally, as you know, but we have got a huge agenda here. Item number 6 is fees and charges pricing strategy.
Sorry, Chair, to interrupt.
We need to agree here.
Sorry, I do apologise. I'm trying her out. Do we agree the report?
Agreed.
Agreed. It was only noted, wasn't it? Sorry, apologies for that. So we'll move on. Agreed. So we'll move on to item number 6 then, and I'll remember to get this agreed first before 7. Yeah, who's introducing this report?
Jalal again, because these are mainly, because this relates to the Housing General Fund, they're mainly his charges, not anybody else's. So it's very straightforward report, Chair. Jalal.
Thank you, Carol. So the Housing Fees and Charges Report of 21-22 sets out the proposed charges for 21-22, and members are asked to note the unchanged and revised fees and note the new fees proposed. Again, I'm not going to read out the whole report, but what I will do is summarise the key information, which is about the services that we will provide to recover cost to fund the council services. Okay. While writing the report, officers have taken into account the circumstances of COVID and the impact it has on the private rented sector, especially for landlords and tenants. In terms of fees, so if I point members to background and information, our licensing fees will remain the same for 21-22, and these are comparable to our neighbouring boroughs. Our our penalty charges are set to the maximum, and those penalty charges include the smoke and carbon monoxide alarm regulations, the energy efficiency regulations, the electrical safety standards in the private rented sector. So those are set by government, and the council cannot amend those fees. In terms of caravan licensing, again, those fees will remain the same for 21-22, and again, they're comparable to our neighbouring boroughs. In terms of selective licensing, these fees are not set within the report, but there will be a separate statutory consultation exercise that will be carried out later this year. And finally, the travellers' site fees will increase by 2.9%. Within the report, there is a new penalty charge which makes reference to the electrical safety standards regulations, which came into force on the 1st of June 2020 to improve electrical safety in all residential properties. And again, the charges set for those properties are set by government. Finally, the housing fees and charges set will generate the council income to pay for services that the council provide. I'm happy to take questions in relation to the report.
Brilliant. I won't waste time on it because I don't see any. For me, I'm happy with the report, and I asked, some questions I asked yesterday. So I'll go straight to the committee, and I'll go to Councillor Abbas as an apology for cutting him out last time.
No, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Dalal, again for your report. So you are increasing the fee for traveller sites, and you have also mentioned the 66% residents are receiving full or partial payments. I understand this is a minor increase, but why do you think this increase is necessary at this stage? And my second is, what is this selective licensing? Thank you.
Okay, I'll go to section 12 in the report, the travellers' charges. So the increase of 2.97, as written in the report, is to help manage the function which the council provide. So that function includes the day-to-day management, repairs and maintenance, and also the tenant engagement service that we provide to the travellers on site. And in terms of the number of residents that are on housing benefit or partial housing benefit, due to changes in universal credit and changing people's circumstances, we've seen an increase of universal credit applications for the travellers who live on those three sites.
Yeah, Councillor Abbas, I think you probably want to follow that up. Councillor Abbas, can you hear me? Do you want to follow that up?
Sorry, my apologies. Sorry, I missed the last bit.
What is selective licensing? Was that was your second question? Yes.
Okay, yeah, I'm coming to. Okay, all right. So in terms of selective licensing, that's a new scheme the council are looking at introducing, which will apply to licensing all private rented properties in the borough. So there's a process that we're going through at the moment, which is gathering the evidence to demonstrate the conditions to introduce that scheme.
So the difference is, Councillor Abbas, I asked this question some time ago when Jalal first started talking to me about this. The difference is that would mean licensing all privately rented properties, not just houses in multiple occupation. So privately rented properties where there's only one family in occupation or one single person in occupation. So that's the basic difference.
So what would be the difference between the selective and the HMO?
As I say, it doesn't just apply to HMOs. So it's not just about houses in multiple occupation, it's about all properties in the private rented sector.
Thank you.
Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Chair. You've answered one of my questions anyway. It was about the traveller sites. How can you tell me what the Mobile Homes Act provides? I didn't think we had any park homes in the borough.
Okay, the council has a caravan park home register, council's website, and I believe there are four caravan sites that are registered under our Mobile Homes Act. In terms of the sites, what the process is that those sites will require planning permission first before the council can license them.
Right. Could we have something in writing to say where they are? Because I don't know of any in the borough. No park homes that I know of have been built in the borough at all or put on anywhere. I think they are talking to the council, but there's none that I know of. If they could have a little bit more clarity on that.
Yes, we can provide that.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Worrell.
Thank you. Mine's a really quick question, and I did ask this last year, but if I was told, I've forgotten. Carbon monoxide alarms. So we have them in our landlords and in our HMOs, but we don't have them in our council houses. So why do we expect private landlords to do what we don't do ourselves? And I ask this because I've got my boiler in my kitchen where lots of people have, and they are in lots of the council houses. I live in an ex-council house, and that's where the boiler was. And I didn't know, but my boiler had leaked in the summer and it was condemned. And when the boiler engineer came, he said to me, "You are lucky that this wasn't in your bedroom, because I swear you wouldn't be here." Because it had leaked through the summer. So if this was in a council house, it's only that it's in my house, you know, and not up the road, you know. Why do we not have these when we expect our private landlords to have them? It was £14 for me to buy a carbon monoxide alarm.
You did ask this question last year, Councillor Worrell, and the answer is it is the law in the private rented sector. It is not the law in the social housing sector. But if you see the white paper on social housing today, that does propose equalising the systems. Since you raised it last year, we have started installing them. So when our gas contractor goes out to do the annual services, they also install carbon monoxide detectors. That has been happening since last year when you raised it, because you raised it.
And how long do you think it would, sorry, Luke, how long do you think it would take before we get round all of them? Because it should be done nearly then, shouldn't it? If everyone has an annual service?
Yeah, I can check that up for you and find out.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm really interested, only because I had the problem myself this year. Thank you.
Chair, can I just add something further to the conversation regarding the smoke carbon monoxide alarm? The government announced today they are looking at equalising this law so it does apply to social housing tenants and private housing tenants. So it appears the law will be changing, and it will apply to both sectors to keep all residents safe.
Thank you. It's something that really does interest me. Thank you.
Brilliant. Have you got one more point, Councillor Redsell?
Only to come back and Giles, he's answered it really. I was going to say, why should it only be the social sector and not everybody? There must be a lot of what Lynn's just brought up. There must be lots of older people in properties where they don't know they should have one. I actually thought that the fire authority were doing something with that as well. So that is something perhaps we can follow up. But if you're saying that the law is going to provide for everybody, that you can't just do the social sector and forget other people, because there's older people who don't know about this. You know, as Lynn said, she didn't know either. So
I didn't. And the man said it's a silent killer, because your body loves what it chucks out. It will die happily, because you'll just go in your sleep and not even know that mine was in my kitchen and not in my bedroom.
Well, it doesn't smell, Lynn.
No.
You can't detect it. So yeah, it's a good thing. So it's brilliant, Carol. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll move on from this report, and we've got recommendation 1.1 that we note revised fees, including those non-applicable, and that Housing Overview and Scrutiny comment on the proposals currently being considered. Are we going to note that? Brilliant. So we'll move on to item number 7, which is the completely uncontroversial Housing Development Programme update.
That's probably through me, Chair, if that's okay. This is the sort of an update that members have seen before in different guises. It's an update on where we are with the housing development programme, and actually I hope it is relatively uncontroversial, but we'll see. It is just giving an update. So most of this, I'll probably focus in on section 3, if that's okay with you, Chair. It's just talking about the progress on the site's options list, which is currently at 15. It was 15 the last time we reported it, which was in September. And that delivers a total of 699 new homes. And we've set out in the appendix as progress against each individual site on the appendix. What we can report is that paragraph 3.3 talks about a consultation at Lowen Road that actually just finished yesterday. So we can update you, giving you an update on the report, and say that this is for 5 new 3-bedroom houses, and that was done virtually. The consultation was done virtually with actually a really rather nice 3D fly-through. I don't know if you've had the chance to go through and see it, but given the constraints of COVID and the fact that we can't actually get out properly as you could previously, we've adopted this sort of fly-through methodology as well. So far, during the consultation, we had 134 views on of the plans, but with only 6 comments. One was about construction traffic and one was about parking. So it was, I'd say, relatively uncontroversial in terms of comments that have come forward. So that's paragraph 3.3. Other progress is listed in paragraph 3.4, which talks about Claudian Way development, which is for 53 new homes. And that's in the process of being completed and handed over. And that should be completed by the end of this year. And then the paragraph 3.5 talks about the Calcutta Road project, which is being designed. That's 35 units, and that should be complete by summer 2021. Then paragraph 3.6 talks about the Culver Centre, which is about 170 units, and that's been through and out for consultation. And that's now been prepared for a planning application is being prepared for that, and we hope to bring that forward by the end of this calendar year. So that's really in terms of the summary. Happy to take any questions, but I'll bring you back to paragraph 1.1, the recommendation, Chair, please, which is to note the progress on the list of housing development sites which are being brought forward for further work. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. Most of the this is sort of a little add-on, isn't it? An update rather than I know that the main issues at the start of the process have already been discussed in a previous meeting, and then yes. the next one will go. The next set of issues will be discussed at planning where they should be. So I haven't got any significant comments to make on this, and I'll give this out to members, and we'll go with Councillor Worrell first.
Thanks, Luke. Thank you for the report, David. So I've just got a couple of questions. So first of all, when will it talks about the next part of the list coming forward. So when would we? So I think it's at 3 point. It says that there's another lot of list coming on, behind. So we've got 15 sites. When would we? I'll ask you all of my questions, and then you can just answer them together. When would we likely to see that list? And with the Culver site, it says it's going to planning, yet the council owns that land. So what's the process of us? I know it's coming through full council, but how can you go through a whole planning process when we don't know how much money we're going to be able to buy that piece of land for? in the first place. So I'd just like to, I don't know if you can answer that or whether Andy, with his planning head, will answer that one. And also, just to note that in full council, Councillor Jeffries actually announced that the adult college is going to close and that the services will now go out around the borough to places more open for learning rather than the building. So, and yet the list still says that it's being looked at, but it was announced in full council that this is actually a definite going to close.
Okay. Through you, Chair, if I can just come back on at least some of those questions. But so the next sites, actually there is a paper, the next paper on the agenda, Lynn. It talks about the housing development approach, and there's some sites that are being developed through that. So I don't want to necessarily give you a date, but clearly we're working on trying to bring those forward, and as soon as we're ready, as soon as we can, we will bring them forward to you. But there is mention of this in the next paper that is coming forward, as we're talking about expanding this list of what's currently 15 into different sites. So that's very much a work in progress, just not quite there, but I'd hope to do something fairly quickly. But the next paper picks that up. Can I just comment on the Richmond Roadside? And obviously the paper was written and drafted before the latest announcement. We're obviously looking at Richmond Road. I mean, that's the implication for us as we're looking at that. I can't really comment on the education, where that will go and how that will be taken forward. That's not really for me, but obviously the Richmond Road site is being explored, and you know, we're looking to try and bring some papers back on that as we look at going forward. So I mean, this report it's number 12 on the sites list, and so you know, we've got some architects appointed. They are looking at the capacity study, and we're looking to try and see how we can put the sites on there. It's still looking at a number of different options of what houses and what mix of housing we can put on there, and that's genuinely a work in progress, and we've not got a resolution yet, but we are working quite quickly on that to try and get something moving forward.
And the Culver site?
Sorry, yeah, the Culver Centre site. So I'm not sure about the planning. I might refer to either Andy. I've got both. I can go up or down here. I've got obviously Andy Millard from the Director of Place with his planning expertise, and I've also got Andy Debnam, who Keith Andrews couldn't be with us today. He's on leave, but we've got Andy Debnam who's got some of the detailed knowledge of the sites here. So I don't know if either Andy wants to make a comment, but I mean, we are just genuinely, you know, that we've been through a couple of consultations already on the site, and actually I think, you know, whilst it was a painful process, we've actually got to a stage where residents actually seem to be quite happy with the second set of proposals that were coming forward, quite as in a relative way. Less vexed, and so I thought, you know, I think as we go forward, that's the basis of the planning proposal we're looking to take forward. Andy.
Chair, if I could just help briefly on this, and Andy Debnam might be able to just reconfirm that, as I understand it, a planning application that's in an advanced stage of preparation, as David describes, will be submitted by the end of this year, and there's a major planning application that would, depending upon planning committee cycles, take around 13 weeks to go to determination. So hopefully that helps with timescales.
Brilliant. I can't wait for less vexed to become a category that we measure on our consultations from now on. That's the new gold standard of Thurrock Council, is it? Less vexed. That's where we are now.
It's an aspirational one that.
Councillor Abbas.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, David, for your report. My question is, obviously you have identified these sites, you know, which are being regularly updated. So first, you just mentioned like you are not sure about the college's future, but if you are identifying this land, if you are looking into options, so if there would be no land, so where would this college go,
So like I say, I mean, that's not really my part of the equation here. Is if the land is made available, if the we started looking at this to be clear, we started looking at this as an option if the college were to leave that site. We looked at it, could you do it with the site, the college partially on the site, and could you look at it without the college on the site? But I'm not involved in the sort of detailed discussions as to where it will go. So I'm afraid you're probably asking the wrong person on that side.
I have another quick question on these. Obviously, you have appointed architects, employer agents, cost consultants, on these to identify these things. So did you know how much have you paid to these consultants and architects?
I don't know. I can get an answer to you outside this meeting, though, so I can feedback. It's relatively light touch, though, at this point in time. There's some sort of light touch drawings that we've done rather than sort of detailed designs.
Thank you.
Councillor Edsel.
Thank you, Chair. I've actually got no questions. A couple of mine have already been asked. I just wanted to give, thank you, David, just to give some praise, actually. I mentioned it on the local development plan as I chair that. The site in Chadwell St Mary, what a lovely site it is. If that's going to be the way we are going forward and the other sites are going to look as good as that, I think we're on a road to win, because it is really lovely. And people have actually, now the boarding's down, people can see it more, and it's quite open. It's got grass and trees, and it's really been done beautifully, really. Just a bit of praise for a change. I know we always moan and groan at certain things, but just to give a bit of praise where it's due. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. That's much appreciated.
I also
now pass it on to the team.
Yeah, I also think that no one like everyone whinges about flats all the time, and I'm sure I've whinged about flats at some point. I'm sure it must have happened at some point, but I do think that in recent time that the Echoes and Alma Court, I aesthetically, as a new part of Grays, I think they look very good, and I think they're it's updated parts of Grays Riverside, and it's I think the council have done pretty well with those sites, to be honest. Does anyone else have any questions about this quickly? If not,
no.
Brilliant. So if we
Luke, can we just confirm that something will come forward on the selling of the Culver sites? Will it come here before it goes to full council?
I'm not sure about. I mean, it's going to go. The next step is to go to planning. So I think we said it probably. We can bring it back here, I think, if needs be.
Because we have to sell the land, don't we? So the council's got to buy the land. It's got to sell the land for the best price that it can. We can't just give it to TRL or an organisation. It's about the council have to get the best price for that land.
We don't at this point in time know who's going to deliver that piece of land. Whether it's so that would be the next step that we need to take.
Okay, thank you.
Brilliant.
Luke, can I just butt in there?
You can always butt in, Joy.
Thank you so much. David, are you saying that that Culver site could be sold or could be taken by somebody like Mosaic Homes, or because they don't come in unless there's enough properties to buy? Is that something a housing association would look at?
We haven't got there, to be honest, Councillor. It's at the moment we're just trying to get it through planning and just trying to see have we got a scheme, and then I think there's at that stage then we need to work out how it's actually going to be delivered. We haven't got that decision made.
Okay, thanks, David. Cheers.
Okay.
Thanks very much for that, David, and thanks for other people who've made contributions. So if we are able, can we note point 1.1 the recommendation?
Noted.
Noted. Brilliant. Yeah. So if we move on to agenda item number 8, which is the housing development and delivery approach. So who's going to be delivering this report for us?
Chair, that will be me.
Thank you, Andy.
So if I could just briefly introduce, I know that members have got the report in front of them and no doubt will have had a chance to read, but this report follows very neatly on from the previous item and looks at various options and approaches that the council could use to further accelerate the provision of much needed homes in the borough. In terms of brief context and things that I'm sure members are aware of, there's a significant need for housing of all types in the borough, with a headline figure of circa 32,000 new homes over a 20-year period or thereabouts. And the council's already made previous assertions around its want to assist towards the delivery of those numbers through the HRA and through TRL. What the report sets out is part of what David's already presented to you this evening around the success the council's had in bringing forward some excellent and exemplar new homes. This isn't just about numbers, it is about the quality of life and quality of placemaking. And some of the sites that have been mentioned, I think are right up there with the very best. And I think that shouldn't be lost in what can often be seen as a numbers game, because it, amongst other things, as well as directly providing for much better places and better accommodation for our residents, it also sets the benchmark that bit higher for the development industry when they're looking to build within the borough. So the report then goes on to section 3, looking at the various available sites for development, and again some overlap with the previous report, and then moves on to look at how we might increase the council's capacity to deliver. That section covers a number of potential options. I wouldn't say they were necessarily exhaustive, but they're potential options, starting, of course, with the existing 2 approaches to the HRA and TRL. But then it talks about other options, for example, working with the private sector to bring forward sites and larger housing programmes across the borough in a variety of ways, whether that be through the local plan and putting land into potentially wider area development to maximise regeneration and housing delivery benefits, working through the local plan on the design charrette processes to really maximise the quality of those developments again as well, or through the use of planning powers. Also in the report it lists the potential for joint venture partnerships, development agreements, that type of arrangement with the private sector or indeed with housing associations as well, and that was mentioned I think in early debate, how that might come about as well. And the report concludes, Chair, with a recommendation of a mixed approach to delivery. I think that is the right one. I think we can spread our options around how we deliver new homes. I think there are a potential wider suite of options, such as those listed in the report, and that leads on to the recommendations at sections 1.1 and 1.2 of the report. Firstly, to note and comment on the proposals to adopt a mixed approach to housing development delivery in order to improve the council's capacity to increase its delivery rate, and at 1.2 to note that potential schemes will be brought forward for approval in line with the council's constitution in due course. So hopefully that's a useful summary, Chair, as I say, in essence and in a line, a report that looks at how we can widen our suite of options to increase homes in our borough. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for that, Andy. Is TRL a going concern?
Sorry, Chair, is TRL
a going concern? Is it still alive?
It's still alive. Currently, it doesn't have any directors. The report sets that out. But as the report also recognises, as part and parcel of this broad suite of options that are set out before us this evening, there is a need to strengthen the board. I think as part and parcel of this work, firstly. Secondly, as we look at ever complex market conditions across the borough created by the global pandemic, And to that extent, there is a proposal to bring forward a report shortly to the shareholders to look at the appointment of new directors. So yes, it is alive, and it does provide at least one of the potential options for delivering housing numbers going forward.
Right, so if I, thanks for that, just on another point, on the 32,000 homes. So if I make the statement, there's no way on earth, and some people don't want it, some people do, there's no way on earth you're going to get anywhere close to 32,000 homes by the end of the local plan. No way on earth. How do you counter that argument if I make that to you, that you know that you can deliver that?
It's certainly a significant number of new homes, and that's the identified need. That number doesn't come from anywhere other than from assessment as to what the needs are. So that's why the figure exists. Firstly, secondly, if you look at the council's delivery rates over the last 10 years, it is on average around 500 units per annum, and 32,000 over the plan period. That's over a doubling of that rate. I think there are two factors that will significantly increase our ability to deliver. One, quite simply, is the allocation of more sites, because if you think about it, there haven't been any large sites allocated for some time, and that's one of the main reasons why the local plan needs to be reviewed in order to bring further housing sites forward, amongst other things. And secondly, certainly in a pre-COVID world, the market conditions were much stronger. If you look at some of the more recent sites that have been developed out in the borough, they've been developed out at pace. The values have way exceeded developer expectations. And you know, the prosperity that's been brought about by having DP World in our patch, the expansion of Tilbury Port, and other reasons that led to at least in a pre-COVID world, a strengthening of our economy, also had a positive knock-on effect on our housing market as well. So market conditions and the availability of land are two big reasons why I think we have the ability to certainly crank up our delivery of housing numbers. The third element, and I touched on it earlier on, and I don't think it should be overlooked, is that we need to address perceptions of Thurrock being a poor place to live. Business and industry have seen us being a great place to locate for a number of years. Our housing market hasn't been quite so strong. As we all know, Thurrock is a great place to live. And I think that the placemaking ambitions of the authority, the examples I gave earlier on about the council leading the way and showing the way in terms of what good quality placemaking and housing can be through the work that it's doing already, is also an important part of that mix. So reimagining the borough and recognising that it is a truly great place to live as well, I think is an important part of that mix. But yeah, in conclusion, certainly a significantly tall order to raise our rates to those sorts of levels, but one which I think is doable, and certainly we can increase rates over what they have been in recent past.
I've got a lot of other questions, but I mean my main question is about how these houses, are you going to make sure these houses are actually affordable for people in Thurrock and aren't just privately rented, private developers that are targeting homes at wealthier people from elsewhere to come into the borough. Not that I've got any problem with wealthier people coming into Thurrock, they're more than welcome, but I won't press you on that, because I have many times before, because I'm keen to make sure that everyone gets a chance to speak. So should we go with Councillor Redsill?
Thank you, Chair. You sold Thurrock, Andy. We're going to put you in a different job, because Thurrock's
I thought I was in the right job for selling Thurrock.
Thurrock's fine when we can move around, and as Luke said, with 32,000 houses, which we're never going to build that many, but if we can move around, it's infrastructure that's not there. The infrastructure, we've said it many times, Andy, haven't we? The infrastructure was not there in the first place. So we have to do something with infrastructure before we start having, you know, sites being built. So we've got a few sites that have been built not so recently, aren't good sites, and we both know where they are, you know. And what I wanted to ask was, if we're going to bring builders into this area, and not always big builders, some of the small companies that are out there that are very, very good. Yeah. And thank you, Luke. There are some really good small companies that build really good housing. What I want to know is where the government is bringing in that we build. It's come up on the local development plan. When we build anything, we put in more greenery. You know, we put in trees. We put in, because this used to happen years ago. You know, things were put in place to give people a walk or whatever, a wood or, you know, something. So I think we need to look at that. That needs to, because people just don't want to live in a house. They want to be able to walk out and enjoy it. And perhaps there is a place for another village. You know, villages were built years ago. Why not now? You know, perhaps another village somewhere. But I think we've got to put that infrastructure in first, Andy. You know, I know you probably agree, but it's something we've got to do. Thank you. Sorry to rant a bit.
Andy, before you answer that, can I just reassure Councillor Baker that I've seen him furiously waving his hand, and that he can follow Andy, okay?
Thank you, Chair.
Andy?
Chair, Councillor, so yeah, points well made, and comes back to my comment earlier on about sometimes the housing discussion is focused on numbers, and it's not about numbers, it's about places and people and the quality of the environment in which they will occupy. So yes, there is a number. How it's provided, and you'll recall the last consultation on the local plan that talks about a range of options, from a new settlement to sort of village expansions and how we thicken up in the urban area. So again, theme of this report tonight, really, there's a mix, a very substantial mix of typologies to bring forward, not just one size fits all in terms of how we might deliver, and in terms of size, and in terms of tenure, and in terms of the sort of mix of types as well. So I mean, there's a complex mix which is driven by the evidence as what's needed, and is driven in a quality sense by raising the bar in Thurrock as well. Just briefly on the point of infrastructure as well, you know, the one thing that I've had ringing in my ears in my old job, my new job, is those sort of three principles around any development that comes forward, having to be high quality, community driven, and infrastructure led, which is very much at the point, I think, Councillor Redsell, in terms of how the infrastructure has to come either up front or at least in parallel with new growth, which is why the approach to the new local plan and the charrette process, building upon the Your Place, Your Voice campaigns that we've run previously, is going to be all important in all of those regards.
Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, Andy. Councillor Baker?
Thank you, Chair. We've been looking at this point regards build more houses in Thurrock. Okay, as we know, we can't move about, as Joyce said a little while ago. The infrastructure, no matter what way you go around it, will not be set in place, because we've got too many people, vehicles, and that's it. Gridlock, galore, no matter where we go. We can't change it. The only way we can change it is demolish about maybe half of Thurrock completely and reshape it all. There's no way we could take all these people on board in our borough, and that's it. That's my argument forever. I can go on about this all night, but that's my point, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. I don't know if you want to quickly respond to that, Andy.
I don't think so, Chair, because I think I probably covered it early on. I absolutely get the concerns of Councillor Baker. Road infrastructure, transport infrastructure is clearly one of the big issues. How we might continue to work in a post-COVID world might positively impact upon that sort of those movement issues. How within new communities we might provide spaces where people can have flexible accommodation that they can hire out and use, I think is part of that debate as well. I guess the only other point is to say, in terms of that transport side of things, that we are currently revising our transport strategy, which will form part of that evidence base for the local plan. So points well made, and absolutely transportation infrastructure is up there with the at the top of that list of the big issues that we need to make sure the local plan addresses.
Chair, can I just, Andy, can I just say this? I think we mustn't overbuild. We're never get through this. We're never going to get. It's going to get worse. Right? And that's it. I live in South Ockenden. I now have to travel to up in Thurrock on Church because it's easier to travel rather than going to Thurrock and Grace.
No, thank you. Councillor Worrell? Have you frozen, Chris? Or
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Chair.
Sorry, Chair.
Right, one second. I think Councillor Baker froze there, actually. Sorry. You want to carry on? I think you froze, didn't you?
Sorry. Did I? Well, I didn't mean to do that. But what I'm trying to say is, you're not answering my question, or Andy hasn't answered my question. Don't overbuild because we can't cope, right? As I say, I live on the edge of Thurrock. The next step up away a little bit is Upminster area. And that's where I have to go shopping now because it's easier to travel backwards and forwards. I don't go to Lakeside. I don't go to Grace because it's impossible to travel. That's my point. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, thank you. Yeah, I thought it was more of a statement, Councillor Baker, when you said we can't build anymore. But it goes back to the point I made earlier on, I think, and that is the importance of providing infrastructure commensurate with what we need to accommodate new growth, but also to deal with existing problems. With growth comes the ability to provide that infrastructure. Without growth, existing issues are going to either perpetuate or worsen. So positively grabbing the growth agenda and using it as an opportunity to help facilitate infrastructure provision is, I think, the way we need to take things forward. But Councillor Baker's absolutely right. Growth that just adds to existing problems, infrastructure or otherwise within the borough, clearly is not acceptable.
Bruno, I can see Councillor Abbas, but first Councillor Worrell.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Chair, and thank you for bringing this report tonight. I almost feel like this report is a year behind where it should have been, because this report could have saved a whole lot of arguments for the last year, because it talks about that joined up approach. It talks about the plan, and I've always felt that the local plan should have been running alongside the housing development programme, because we've got the housing development programme. Joy talks about we need to have greenery. The housing development programme on here tonight talks about infill sites again. I'm trying to protect green spaces, not build on them. We've got to be more open about, Chris, if you can't travel anywhere. This report is a good report, and I'm really pleased to see it here. I have got a couple of questions, but I just felt like I needed to say this report has been a long time coming, and it should have been here a long time ago, because we could have got stuff done a lot easier if we'd have had the guidelines and the principles which are set out in this report. So thank you for bringing the report here tonight. I have got a few questions. So first of all, it's almost like I'm asking the other half of Luke's question, because I'm going to ask about TRL. So before TRL was TRL, it was Gloriana, and it was set up, and it had council officers and the section 151 officer and somebody outside and some councillors, and then it talks about there's been the board have resigned due to a conflict of interest. What's the conflict of interest this year that wasn't there in 17, 18 and 19, and as long as it's been there, what suddenly made everybody want to resign off of that board when we're being told it's completely viable and it'll still be trading? It doesn't make sense. That's my TRL question.
Chair, if I can cover that one first. I mean, I can't speak on behalf of the directors, but as I understand it, their concern was in effect in wearing two hats and being council officers and being directors of TRL at the same time. I don't think there was any indication in their resignation that they didn't think TRL as an entity, aside from their own positions, as it were, wasn't a viable proposition in some way, shape or form. And as part and parcel of the work to bring this report forward this evening, and if I can comment on your previous report as well, I think it's well made in terms of how that then parallels with where we are with the local plan as well. So part and parcel of us revisiting that whole basket of approaches and looking at how, probably for want of a better description, a rejuvenated a TRL can contribute towards that as part and parcel of the mix. But I don't think there's anything in their resignations that suggested they didn't think that TRL was a doable proposition with other directors in place. They just personally felt the way that they did when they resigned.
Is TRL completely viable, Andy, as it stands? You know, financially, it can wash its own face. You know, it's not got no complications sitting behind it. You know, if I was to pull down the company accounts, you know, is everything fine there?
I'm not aware of any issues with the company accounts, and indeed that's the type of model is not dissimilar to that run by other councils in the country as well. So I think that the model is a sound one.
Okay, and can I just ask a few questions? They are really quick fire ones rather than go round the circle. Why is TRL not going to be one of the biggest, you know, like the Culver Centre, right? Why are we even considering selling that, or possibly looking at not building it ourselves when we could build those houses, sell what we want to sell, rent what we want to rent, and keep what we want to keep? You know, like, why can we not have all of that money? Why make somebody else rich? Developers are very rich people, other than the little ones that Joy's on about, but they're not going to look at like the Culver Centre and the like. You know, why don't we do this and then think bigger about estate management and the bigger stuff? You know, the Culver Centre could earn us fortunes to build loads more social housing.
As David indicated in response to a question earlier on, the Culver Centre hasn't been sold, and formal decisions have not been made on what will eventually happen to that site. We're progressing the planning permission or planning application, which once permission is granted will lead to a consideration of those options. But yeah.
So that will be on there, will it, for the Culver Centre for us to build it? That will maybe be on there.
No decision has been made, is my point.
Oh, okay then. And yeah. Can I just add one more question, Luke? Can I just ask about Belmont Road? So I see that Belmont Road in the narrative is that you're looking at building there in 2021. You know, it's failed a few times because of access issues. Why? What's changed? You know, how are you going to build on there next year when you haven't been able to build on there up until now, and it's the same road in and out?
Belmont Road is a TRL site. It has planning permission, and there are conditions attached to that planning permission to ensure that the safe and reasonable development of that site. So ostensibly it's there and ready to go. There have been previous concerns, as we know well, expressed by the community over that site, but it does have a bona fide planning permission in place.
Yeah. So, Councillor Abbas.
No, Chair. Thank you.
Okay.
Answer my question.
Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chair. Just getting back to what Lynn was talking about there. In real terms, is it all to do with money? Is that why we can't do as what Lynn has suggested, Chair?
It can't do what's suggested in terms of building out ourselves, Chair.
Yeah, building a project the size of Culver Centre
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, that is a factor. The report sets out the relatively the small scale size of the housing delivery team. So that is something that we have to. I'm not saying we couldn't, but Councillor Baker's right. You know, there is a point as to the capacity within the team to be able to deliver a number of sites. It's already delivering an ambitious programme, as David's presented to you this evening. But yeah, it's something that would have to be taken in the mix when it comes to a decision on how we're going to get that particular site away.
That's brilliant, but we've got residents in our borough to cut a right arm off, a left arm, whatever, to get a property in the area of the coal centre. That goes to our people. That's what I say myself personally. The council should have that area for housing for our people. That's what I say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Has anyone else got any other comments? Because we're not actually doing too bad for time. Anyone else? No.
Luke, I don't understand one of the recommendations. If somebody could explain what 1.2 means, I don't even know what that means to be able to agree it.
I think that, or in terms of the constitution, because obviously it refers to your question in the last report. But are you asking about what it means in terms of what does the constitution say?
No, the clarification. Yeah, in line with the council's constitution in due course. What does that mean? I don't even know what that means.
Through you, Chair.
Sorry, David, I can.
That's okay. That's all right.
So basically, if, for example, you wanted to enter into a joint venture with a private developer, if you wanted to acquire a large site, if you looking to dispose of land, depending on what the actual project is, it may require a formal decision of the council to be able to progress it. That's what that means. In other words, there are further approval processes sitting alongside any one of those options that may well be required in due course, depending on which options are pursued.
The big through council. Yeah, sorry, David.
So sorry, Chair. I was just going to add. It's effectively just saying that you're not voting on any schemes here tonight. It's just you're looking to expand the approach. That's really what we're saying. Any paper that's talking about a specific scheme will come through the normal process, and you'll get to see that. That's what I think it's saying.
I just didn't understand it. It's easier that I asked before.
No, it's fine.
Oh, we've got a question from our other resident, Lynn. How you doing, Lynn? Oh, you're on silent, Lynn. Oh. Yeah, still on silent, Lynn. Oh, you are.
No, found it. I couldn't find it. Sorry.
There you are. Come on then.
What I'd like, what I don't know is who on the Culver site, whether we can do it ourselves, the decision hasn't been made, or whether we sell it. Who makes that decision, and does it come back to us before the decision made, or is that totally different committees?
So I think the first thing, it will go through to planning. That's the next step. So there's an opportunity for people there to look at the scheme, and then I think in due course there's a discussion. Then we need to work out what the scheme is and how it can then be brought forward. So that's actually the next step. That's about as far as I'm. That's really that's the point we're trying to make. It's just that next step is into planning, and then we can decide how it goes forward from there.
Yes, I understood that. Sorry, is that all right, Chair, to come back? I understood that, but and I know it's got to go through to that planning and that, but then after that, to make the decision as to whether or not we build it or whether we sell the land, does anything of that come back to our committee to discuss, or does it go to other committees? Where does it go? Or can't you answer that? I don't know.
Yeah, I can, Chair. It's very likely, depending on what route, to be a cabinet decision. particularly if we're looking at a disposal. And certainly, even if it doesn't need a formal report as such, we can keep this committee updated on that and other potential disposals in line with these various options as time moves forward.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Chair, to add, I mean, you get regular reports coming back through to this committee on progress with the housing development, so it would always be caught up in that process as well as we bring updates to you through that process.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for that. Thanks for all that information. Oh, we've got Councillor Redsel's put a hand up. Only if you're quick.
Chair, it was only a point of sort of making from Andy, actually. But before it goes to planning, wouldn't it go to full council first as you're disposing of land before it goes to planning? It seems a roundabout way to put in planning permission for something we haven't even sold yet.
That's what I was asking earlier.
Yeah, it doesn't seem the right way to go about it. I mean, I may be wrong, but having spent my time on planning, I would have thought it would, before it went to planning with an outline application, it would go to full council first, or as Andy said, to cabinet, you know, some way of...
Yeah,
I would have thought that was the right way round. Sorry, Andy.
Yeah, there is no hard and fast rule in that regard, Chair. The advantage of getting planning permission is that you have a greater assessment as to what the value of that site is, particularly if you were going to look to dispose. Certainly, if disposal in any way, shape or form is the likely outcome, I would suggest that taking it through planning first to assess that value is the best way round.
Okay.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. So if we look at the recommendations then, the first one is just to note and comment on the proposals, and the second one is that's been clarified now, 1.2 as well. Are we happy with those recommendations?
Happy to.
All good. Brilliant. Thank you very much. So if we move on to, and I believe some of the officers are they leaving us now, or are you sticking around for a little bit longer? I think is Andy and David leaving us now?
Unless you need us for anything else, you've had our items, Chair. If you want us to wait, that's fine. But equally,
I think I'll let you have some private time. So thank you very much for all your contributions this evening. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chair. And I think Andy Debnan will probably be leaving with me as well, if that's okay. Through you, Chair.
Brilliant.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you, then.
Thank you.
Thank
Cheers.
You. Good night.
So if we move on to item 9, which is the rent setting process, and who will be introducing that report?
This one will be me, Chair. I think people know me, but I'm Mike Jones. I'm the strategic lead for corporate finance and the strategic lead for housing. I'll briefly introduce the report and just touch on a couple of points in there and a little bit of the background. So this is the annual HOA rent setting report. So this outlines the HOA rent setting process and also the process for the resident engagement, which we're currently undertaking. So the committee has asked us comment really and note the proposal which are discussed within the report. So just a little bit of background. So this is the second year that the council has the ability now to increase HOA rents. This was following the 4-year HOA rent reductions in previous years. The policy or the process really is driven by the central government policy, and it limits the council's ability to increase rents by a maximum of CPI plus 1%. So the CPI is based on the September 2000 figure, which for this year would be 0.5%. So the maximum increase the council can apply is 1.5%. The report then details paragraph 3.1 and 3.2, give an indication as to what this could mean for the average council rents. This always has to be done on averages, really, given the volume of the stock. But we do keep detailed calculations behind all of these at an individual property level. So A 1.5% rent increase on the current rent would be an average of £1.35 across the housing stock and £2.44 for the affordable housing properties. We then really sort of go in and just sort of say around what this kind of means and a little bit of background. So, I mean, as people are probably aware, the HOA is a ring-fenced account. So the only source of income that comes into the housing revenue account is through self-generated income, which is predominantly rents and service charges. There's no other cross-subsidisation between the general fund and the HRA. This is effectively the only source of income that the HRA can generate. We've got a little section in there just around garage rents as well. So this is another part of the HRA stock, and this is looked at in consideration each year as well. So there is a proposal or a suggestion in there for an increase in garage rents as well on a weekly basis. Just in terms of some of the wider context, really, and in paragraph 4.1, we've included just a graph there to sort of show the comparison between social rents, which is what the bulk of the HRA stock is charged, affordable rents, which is done up to 80% of market value, and the open market rent. And the graph just really demonstrates between bedroom size where those kind of 4 different levels of rent sit, and where this is in the context of the overall kind of housing market. In terms of the financial side of it, that the HRA compiles and maintains a 30-year business plan. So when we're looking at decisions and the levels of income and investment, it's always done on a 30-year basis. That's really to do with the life cycle of properties, and it needs that long-term strategic view when we're looking at income and expenditure over a long period of time. There will be further reports on this coming forward, which are more detailed in terms of the costs and what it means for the business plan in the wider context. But this is really just setting the scene as to what the rent sort of process is and the engagement process which we're following. We've got a little bit in there from paragraph kind of 4.5 down with, which is just some of the a little bit of the detail of some of the performance. So some of the things which we try and control, and we best to. The 2 big ones really are around void loss and capital void relet times. So obviously with the current COVID pandemic, and this has to be mentioned in the context of this report, there has been an impact on the ability to undertake certain tasks, and this really just demonstrates that despite that, we're still operating at a reasonable level and still doing the best we can to maximise all the resources which we've possibly got and make the best use of the resources which are in the housing revenue account. 4.7 just gives a little bit more background around the current level of reserves which are within the housing revenue account. So this year we opened with 10.8 million, and we'll be looking at closing about 5.6 million. And that shift really is because of the investment in some of the new build stock. It isn't as a result of adverse financial situations. It's a conscious investment, and this will be paying things for like Tops Club, Calcutta Road, and Freudian Way as those properties develop. So that was always part of the plan, to use some of the HRA reserves to invest into new stock and development, which we're currently on course to do so. The consultation exercises we detailed there has been obviously difficult and restricted for this year. I mean, last year we undertook a lot of face-to-face consultation, but because of social distancing measures, we're not able to do that this year. So as an alternative, we've moved it more to an online exercise where residents will get the chance to comment on the proposals. We will be producing an actual video to sort of explain the rent setting process in a bit more detail, what it means for tenants, go into more detail around those kind of average stock numbers, so people get an indication as to what a 1.5% increase could look like, what it would mean, and people can get a gauge or get an idea as to what it could mean for them individually. The other part in there is the table just under paragraph 6.3, and this really shows the level of investment that the HRA and the council are trying to make into its existing housing stock. So the numbers detailed in there forms part of a 5-year capital programme which we're working to, and this is all investment in existing council stock. This is outside of the new build programme development. So the Transforming Homes, as we know, covers all the existing stock and it's the decent home standards and feeds into all of that. And the other big ones really there are around the compliance and making property safe, and it's all the investment required in that as well. So as you can see from there, there's a significant level of investment that the council's required to make and is also choosing to make into the investment of existing stock. That obviously is sourced through revenue funding, although it forms part of borrowing and various other mechanisms, but ultimately it's sourced through revenue funding. I think that's it really in the main. So the details in the report, so I won't read through it in a huge amount of detail, but I'm happy to answer any questions or any further queries.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. Really good summary. It's a good report. I'm aware that this was a bit of a humdinger of a report a year ago, wasn't it? I think this was a bit of a spiky
It was
report.
more the HRA business plan last year. That was
Okay,
January.
I mean, what I will say is that my views are on the record on this. I said it the last time in budget. You know, that I do support these rent increases. For my part, I mean, I found that the freeze was just a disaster. It was a policy that I've always opposed. I always thought it was had terrible implications, and it was done for headlines and political reasons rather than anything else. So, I mean, I'll leave it to others, but I will say that I do. My comment on this, I do agree with this rent increase. I think it's absolutely necessary. No one likes to put people's bills up. You know, it's not no fun for anyone to do that, but it's something that has to happen. We're already shortchanged from 5 years of freezes, and we can't afford anything more. And I would have said that even before the COVID. You know, irrespective of COVID, that was my opinion. But with the pandemic and the other expenses that the department's incurring and potentially going to incur, we just don't know how long this is going to carry on for. I think it would be, from my perspective, it would be short-sighted to not approve this rent increase. But I'll give it. That's only an opinion, and I respect other people's opinions. And I'll go first to, I think it was Councillor Redser who put a hand up, and then it will be Councillor Worrell.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think the same way as you. Thanks, Mike, for the report. Carol won't like me at the moment, but my only gripe is the garages. You know, how can we put something up on the garages when we're not doing anything to make them better than they are? But I know it has to go up, but I think we've got to move on, and we've had a problem, obviously, with the pandemic has got in the way of it all, but we're going to soon have to move forward with that. That's my only gripe. I agree with everything else. The housing have done a big job in redoing the homes with the new kitchens, new bathrooms, and it's, you know, they've done a wonderful job. But the only gripe is that with the garages, putting them up again when we're not really looking after them at all. And, you know, I know we are doing a few odd doors and things, but they are looking really sorry in a lot of areas. And I think Carol will probably agree with that. But that's my only gripe, Mike. It's a good report. I agree with the, you know, the small rises. They're not big rises, you know, for all the people have had done in their council homes. They've really, you know, council have done a really brilliant job. So that's my only gripe. Sorry, Carol.
I'll answer your gripe. As you know from the reports that we've presented to this committee over a number of years, we are spending a lot more money on garages. So there's a £75,000 revenue budget and a £200,000 capital budget in this year. And next year, as you'll see from Mike's table in the report, I'll just point you to it at 6.3. That will go up to £500,000.
Brilliant.
So there are a lot of them, and they have been neglected for a very long time. So it does take a long time to get around them all, but we are, you know, we are doing it.
You knew I'd be there on that.
I knew, yes.
Okay.
I'm shocked at that.
You are.
Councillor Worrell. Go on. Councillor Worrell's got some comments about garages, apparently. She was telling me earlier.
I have got nothing to say about garages because I'd rather that money was spent on the old age pensioners' security gates, actually. But that's nothing personal to you, Joy. Right. you know me, Joy. At 3.4, it says the council will try to ensure that they does not set a level of rent where people on universal credit wouldn't be able to live in these homes. This is the first time I've ever seen a report that says that we could build houses and properties that we wouldn't be able to let to people on benefits. What if somebody, you know, went into one of those houses and then they couldn't then stay in it because they fell out of work and they couldn't afford their rent? I've never seen that. We've always set our rent levels for whatever we build at something that all residents could live in them. And I can't support us, you know, ever building stuff that we can't rent to all of our residents. It just worries the life out of me that we will start building homes for the haves and the have-nots. So could somebody explain to me why we've got this, we'll try to ensure in, that's my first question.
I think, Councillor Wall, for the purpose of this report, then anything that the HRA did, certainly in terms of housing development, would always be within the local housing allowance figure. I mean that would be the, and it's precisely for the points you make, that is the cap up for which housing benefit and universal credit will be made. It's just a kind of wider comment about the wider council development sort of process. So probably outside of the HRA, really, I mean, it's just that kind of that wider context around some of the other housing development options which potentially could be put forward. But certainly in terms of that, in terms of the HRA, and I think, you know, Carol would agree that any development programme in the HRA would have to meet that criteria of being affordable within local housing allowances, which is kind of the upper limit of where we would ever want to go to in terms of what the rents would need to be.
So we shouldn't have had that in there, really.
Can I just say for clarity, I mean, this is referring to houses within the HRA that aren't set at a social rent, but are set at an affordable rent, because that's the only way. And this would just be to do with flats, the sort of area, you know, the sort of buildings that that have service charges because they have common communal grounds, lifts, that sort of thing. I do agree with Lynn, and I don't have any problem with getting a bit more clarity on what she has said, because I know this is about rent and it's not about service charges. So the rent's always going to be affordable, but I think you should definitely take that point from Lynn on board when considering any service charges on these HRA properties going forward, because I think that's something which a lot of councillors would have issue with. Do you want to carry on, Lynn?
Yeah, no, I just wanted some, you know, it really upset me that I've never read that in a report before, and it was obviously, sometimes you have to look into the reports to like, and then otherwise I go, well, it went to scrutiny and you didn't have anything to say, and I just wanted to make it clear that I could not support us ever renting, you know, building homes that if somebody fell on hard times, they'd have to then give that home up. You know, people need to go into forever homes. And so thanks for the support on that, Luke. I just had to really just make sure that we had that, because I just want the guarantees that, you know, we will never go down that route here in Thurrock. And I want to talk about on page 63, which is the where we're spending our money. The sheltered accommodation improvement projects have got 0 next to them for years. The next 3 years, we're spending nothing on sheltered accommodation improvements. So was it a choice for us that the gates weren't part of that? I know it's a service charge, but some of these is like entry door installations, lifts, you know, refurbishments. You know, why was it a choice? Could we, I'm not saying you will, but I'm just saying, could we have made a choice to make the electronic gates that protect our elder residents come in under this budget? I'm not saying it should, I'm just saying, could it?
No, because that is a specific programme of works around ramps and door entry, and that's why it doesn't go into the future, because it's a specific programme of works in the last financial year and this financial year. That's what that means. It was about those two items, ramps and doors. So it's about putting the push buttons on the doors so that frail residents don't have to push them open themselves, as well as putting the proper ramps in so that it's about independent living and carrying on independent living. And that's what that programme is about, which is why it doesn't continue into the future, because it's specific works to be done over 2 years.
Yeah, but then we've got things like garages and flats.
Can I say something? I think that this is probably, in this instance, referring back to this table in the report on the actual gate report might be the best way.
Okay, all right, then I'll come back to it. I just wanted to know, if could we have done it? Could somebody have said we could do that because the gates are this long old, we should have planned to do it. So yeah, I'll come back to it, Lou.
They've given you a lovely chart to come back to as well, so.
Yeah, lovely. It's all in there for me. Can I just ask about
oh,
this?
Sorry.
I have got another question. It says a full and detailed engagement exercise taking place over rent increases. Other than going online, could you tell me how residents are going to be able to engage with this?
I think Ryan might be best to answer that one, if you don't mind, Ryan. Ryan's been kind of leading on the whole engagement process and all the IT side of it, so Ryan would be able to describe that much better than me.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike. Yes, so from an engagement perspective, we are working in difficult times, and the ability to go out and physically hold meetings with people of any size is very limited right now. It's not something that is feasible to do. So we've gone for an approach with the online engagement, which is truly the best thing that we can do right now to reach as many people. Now, I'm mindful of the fact that I know that for everyone, it's not ideal. There is a process in place that we have with our contact centre. So if anyone has made an inquiry, they've called up, those referrals are being passed through to my team, and comments and issues are being addressed in that way. So people are getting responses back to them in that regard. With our sheltered housing tenants, there is facility in place for questions and comments to be passed directly to their sheltered housing officer, and those information will come back to us. Again, if there's any questions that they need more information on, that will come to my team, and we can pass that back across as well. So we've tried to be mindful of that in that regard. And the comment was made earlier on about these being unprecedented times. We've put together probably the best thing I think we could. Mike has made a comment about our plans to put a video together. We've asked people to submit their questions, and what we're going to do is respond to those, as well as things that were put to us in writing. And that way we actually get the information out that people want to hear, that our tenants want to know about, rather than just things that we think that they want to hear. So we've tried to think of a couple of things to be a bit more creative.
I'm not sure about how the data protection works, but is there any problem with you picking out a group of, sampling a group of council tenants and calling them, a certain amount of, different age groups, different areas of the borough? Is there any problem with you calling, say, 100 people? And I mean, I know it's time consuming, but is that something that can be considered, and doing a survey on a random group that you've picked? Because that would possibly, I know you can't engage. I know you can't go around people's homes. I know there's even concerns about sending lots of posts being sent back to and from. I mean, I know from our perspective, when it comes to political groups, a lot of people wouldn't like a leaflet being stuck through the door by some random person, just sticking loads of leaflets through their door at the moment, because people are so worried. So I do understand that, but is there any chance of some telephone calls to people?
So we can look into it, and we can see about the practicalities of that and how we can engage further. What I would say is our engagement so far this year, we've had over 400 people go and engage on that platform already and find out what it might mean to them, which is a considerable increase in the number of people we had last year, even when you consider the face-to-face meetings that we did hold. But yes, I'll look into that and I'll see what other things we can do to make sure that people's voices are being heard.
Did you have anything else you wanted to say, Lynn? Because I cut in there, sorry.
Oh, I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Sarah.
Thanks, Lynn.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your report. I echo the words of Councillor Worrell. She has. Obviously, I'm going to oppose these increases, especially this year. I understand these are minor increases, and obviously council need to have regular kind of, revenue. But this time, particularly this year, I wouldn't be supporting these things. And on garages, I remember, I don't know when this report came, and it shows that we have huge pool of empty garages. So rather than actively renting out or letting out those garages, why are we just kind of increasing our this rent for our existing tenants? So do you have any kind of justification for this?
Councillor Abbas, if you remember the report the committee considered at the last meeting, you'll remember that there's been a massive increase in the letting of garages. Yes, there are a lot of empty garages, but we have made a massive increase in the amount of garages we're letting. And the reason we let them is because people want them. You will also remember we had a discussion about that at the last meeting. People, there is a waiting list and people want to rent them.
So do you know how many are empty at this stage? If there is a long list? So...
Not off the top of my head, Councillor Abbas, I'm afraid no, but I can find that out and get back to you.
Thank you.
Councillor Redsill.
Thank you, Chair. Just a good point you made. I just wanted to pick up on that, and probably Lynn feels the same. There are a lot of residents that you're just not going to get to because they don't do, computers, and they're not technologically, savvy. And I think what Luke suggested is a good idea. If you just take 100 or whatever, we're all working from home now. It might be something we could do where everybody could just take 25 or something. And I think that would be a good input back, where people can't get out and they'd feel included as well in that. So it was just to reiterate your point, Luke.
And I see that Lynn's got her hand up. Is it for another point or was it from previous?
Sorry, it was up from earlier. Sorry.
We've all been there. Yeah, if we want to, if that's it, everyone's got to say. If we could just, I know there's going to be differences of opinion on budget night probably about where we go with this, and there's going to be quite a lot of discussion around it. But if we could we've commented on it and note recommendation 1.1. Yeah. So we're all good for that. All right. Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thank you very much. So if we go on to item 10.
Way!
Yeah. Now I've heard there's a furious councillor, a guest star, joining us tonight, and she's promised me that she's not going to use any expletives during the committee. It's an absolute promise. So please, if you could introduce this report, please. On the automatic gates.
Okay, thank you. I think that's me. I'm not going to say too much because the report is very clear on the locations and the recommendations and what the consultation has revealed. So I will just take any questions. I'll also make it clear that this is not a report that's going to Cabinet. This is a report that's here because Councillor Worrell asked for it last time.
As I mentioned, we've got a councillor who is making representations on behalf of a warden who's requested to speak at this committee. So, Councillor Holloway, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you for allowing me to attend and to speak. I don't ever remember ever promising no expletives, but I'll try and keep it PG. I know you've got a packed agenda. I mean, I wonder, Chair, I'm not sure how you manage your meeting. Is it okay? I've got 4 questions. Do I ask one and wait for a reply? Is that okay with you?
However you wish to proceed, it's fine. I mean, we're actually pretty good for time considering how packed the agenda is, so it's not an issue.
Okay, I'll try not to take up too much. Thank you so much. I did address these questions to officers about 5 weeks ago, but I was told I'd have to come to the meeting this evening, so that's why I'm here. So a huge thanks, and it won't be any surprise the questions that are coming up as well. So my first one is the report says, the written report and the email that I received on the 14th of October said that my residents had agreed a service charge. My question is, were they given an option to keep the gate but not be charged?
No.
At full council, the portfolio holder said no decision had been made when I asked if he wouldn't charge my elderly residents for their scrutiny, but the email I received on the 14th said that it was agreed and would be implemented in the new financial year, and the report this evening seems to indicate that it's going ahead now. So can I ask what is actually happening, and when can I tell my elderly residents that they'll have their security?
Can I take that one, Chair? So we are not yet have not yet completed the full consultation over all of the sites. We want to wait until we've done that. As Carol said, this is not a cabinet decision, so it will be a decision that will be taking finally once we've completed that with the portfolio holder, once we've completed that exercise. At the moment, our recommendation will be in discussion with the portfolio holder based on the evidence and based on the feedback that we've had from the residents, based on having to look at the balance of spend within our HRA, that we will have a service charge at the Rookery. Not everyone else supported that in other consultation exercises, but this will be from the 1st of April next year, but it will be once we've completed the exercise and then we've sat down with the portfolio holder and made a recommendation to him.
Okay, so I can't, I'm still not quite clear. So it's going ahead, but it's not 100% confirmed until the other consultations have gone out and the portfolio holder has agreed.
Yes, I mean, Carol need to advise me exactly when all the consultation exercise will be complete. We're well through the exercise, as you can see from the report. But Carol will be able to answer exactly when that will all be finished.
Yeah, I'm waiting to hear. We need to do some consultation on Benyon. That's the only one that's outstanding. And I'm in discussion with officers in the parking service about whether they can consult on extending parking, a controlled parking zone to that area. And then, so that's just the thing I'm waiting for there, is to sort of have one clarity for what the residents can expect. So controlled parking, gates, no gates. We'll have to, so I'm just waiting for them to get back to me on that.
Okay, so I'll tell my residents that they can expect something in the new year, then it will be confirmed in the new year. Is that right?
That's approximately the timetable, yes. We don't want it any later than that, but hopefully it may be this side of Christmas, but it's more likely to be early January, yes.
Okay, my third question is, it mentions in the report that there are no security concerns in the current location. Was this exploration carried out during the first lockdown?
Roger, you look like you're about to say something.
No, you'll know exactly the consultation undertaken better than me.
We're looking back at the whole of, this was looking back at the whole of the last year. So this wasn't something that we looked back at reported incidents over the last year. So whilst part of that would have been covered by the first lockdown, part of it definitely wasn't.
Okay, because there's quite a bit of confusion with regards to what's been said and really the site with regard, I mean, it's opposite a school. Obviously, there are additional security issues, so it didn't quite make sense to my residents what had actually come across, because they didn't think that it was actually the case. My last question is, the total cost in the report says that to replace 5 gates is 113,000. it says in the table of the individual sites that there's not going to be any consultation in Alexandria Court. So I assume that, and I understand that residents are going to be moved out of that site. So that means that it's 4 sites, is that correct? Which means about 90,400. So can I just clarify that you're telling me that out of a £50 million budget, we can't find 90,000 for security gates for our older people?
Alexandra Court, as you will see, the next report on the agenda is about decommissioning Alexandra Court. So there was no point in consulting residents about, it's a very different kind of gate, Alexandra, as well. As we're about to decommission it, it would have been disingenuous to consult them about keeping a gate on a, to start a consultation with them about decommissioning their complex. But so that's the answer on that one. It's 5 if you include Benyon.
No, it here says New Maltings, Helford Court, Benyon Court, Rookery Court, and Alexandra Court. But obviously no Alexandra Court. So the 4 are New Maltings, Helford Court, Benyon Court, Rookery Courts at 90,400.
Sycamores. So the Sycamores was in the original calculations of all the cost of all the gates. Obviously they have made a decision, chosen not to go with it, but that's the cost of all the gates.
Okay, 4 gates now.
Yeah, so
it's 4 gates. Let's get the figures
it's
really
not
right.
4 gates. It's 4 complexes. Several of the complexes have more than 1 gate.
Okay, that's not made clear in the report. We're still talking around 90,000 though, aren't we? And bearing in mind our budget, it's not a lot of money in the budget really to protect our older people. I mean, Councillor Redsell is always advocating so strongly for our older people and saying about the services and the respect that they should get. I hope she'll support me in this. We can't find £90,400 for 4 complexes out of a £50 million budget.
We have to make choices around the HRA in a number of areas, as Councillor Holloway will know. As you know, the gates in Rookery have been down for over a year. There's been no issues around security that has arisen since that period of time. Over that period of time, we have consulted with the residents. They are prepared to pay the service charge for the Rookery. That was from the door-to-door conversations that we had with them. At the end of the day, we will have to make some choices. There are lots of things we would like to spend more money on within the HRA. We have to make some priorities. And this will be one that we'll take back to the portfolio holder and discuss with him in the next few weeks.
Thanks, Roger. Just one final comment, Chair, and then I'll leave it at that because obviously we're not getting any movement here. I think you're right. It is all about choices. My residents weren't given a choice. They didn't make the choice to pay. They either had to remove their security or pay. They didn't have an option not to. So to say that they agreed with a charge is just disingenuous because they didn't, because I spoke to them and they're not happy about it. So really don't think it's appropriate to keep that on when they weren't given another option. And the choices that you're making, I was listening in at the end of the last report, you're spending £75,000 on garages and 90,000 for security for old people. They're the choices that are currently being made, and it's atrocious. But that's all I'll say in it, Chair. I've had my questions answered. Thank you so much again for letting me speak. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I'm interested to, and again, it is about choices, and I thank Councillor Holloway for impassioned representation of her residents there. But you know, the £50 million, a lot of it is spent, and you can't not spend it. You know, it has to be spent. Yeah. So I understand that these choices. I'm interested about what is the choice that's being made here. What do we lose if we decided to spend this money on the gates? What are the potential loss? You know, what is the choice? Basically, I want to know why has the decision been made that we can't afford this, and because we have to pay for something else? I just want to know what do you foresee? I know it's hard for me to say, but I mean, I'm assuming you had this discussion. What are we now paying for in sheltered accommodation that we wouldn't have been able to pay for in these complexes if we'd spent the money on the gates? Because that's probably I think an important part of the discussion.
Okay, well, obviously it's just about the whole of the housing revenue account and not just about sheltered housing. The £50 million is for all the assets within the housing revenue account. And so, for example, this year we've started a new communal and external decorating programme. That's something that we have made a decision to do and spend more money on because that is something that's important to all residents across all of our properties, not just in sheltered housing, but everywhere. We have an assisted decorating programme that is specifically for people in sheltered housing and for residents in general needs who can't do their own internal decorating. Following on from the rent increase last year and in the housing revenue account business plan that was agreed last year, we said that one of residents' priorities was to spend more money on door entry systems. So we're spending more money on door entry systems. So those are the sort of choices that Roger was talking about. And I think it's important to understand that only 1.1% of our residents are covered by these gates.
Another point I wanted to make is, one of my questions is, are these gates providing genuine security to residents, or are they just protecting private property that is otherwise, in terms of motor vehicles, that are insured? Not that a loss of a motor vehicle is not traumatic, but is that the council's position that they don't think that there's going to be any genuine risk to the security of residents through the loss of these gates?
We clearly would not do this if we thought that there was any serious risk of increasing crime or increasing any risk to our sheltered accommodation. I would repeat that the gates have not been operating for over a year now. There has been no increase in any ASB or any criminal reported crimes on that particular estate. They are very expensive gates to replace. It's not. I can't say what we made a choice of putting this in as opposed to something else. We have had to look at the overall HRA in the round. There is a secondary entrance into the block as well. And our view, looking at in the round, looking at each individual site, is that this was a choice. And again, we haven't made the final decision yet, but that is likely to be the recommendation put to the portfolio holder, that this did not decrease the security for tenants in that block.
That was the argument of, and I know it was an argument that I brought up with certain other policies when you were trying to extend service charges, is that, why should, and it works the opposite way round in this case, why should everyone pay a cost for a benefit that is only being enjoyed by a few residents? So I suppose that's one argument that I know has been put out. But in terms of, Councillor Holloway has mentioned the consultation. Now, I know how hard it is to do a consultation with anyone at the moment, but in these complexes, there's a lot of people that have got high risk to COVID at the moment, so it's even more difficult to do that. Are you happy that the consultation has got enough responses across the block, and are you happy that the consultation was carried out in an acceptable and with a high enough quality?
Yes, everybody got a letter and was asked to send that back. There also are daily calls to a lot of the residents in sheltered housing, which has been going on throughout the pandemic. And where they don't have a daily call, they have at least a weekly call. So we're keeping in touch with all of our residents all of the time. All the letters also had the sheltered housing officer's number on it to ask any questions. And the sheltered housing officer spoke to, in the different sheltered housing officers in different complexes, spoke to all the residents. So I'm not sure what else we could have done other than speak to everybody, send everybody a letter and ask them all to express their views.
Thank you for that. I can see, Chris, I can see you waving your hand, so don't worry, you're not going to miss out. Councillor Borough.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose I'd just like to have an answer to the question that I asked in the previous report is, could it have been picked up in this, in when we're setting the budget for what to be paid for. I'm not saying will it, because obviously it won't, because it's not in this, but could it? Was a decision made that says that it couldn't be paid for out of that budget, is my first question.
As I said in the last item, that was a specific programme to do specific works to all the sheltered housing blocks across the borough to bring them up to a standard that we used to call compliant with the Disability Discrimination Act, and we now call, I guess, Equality Act compliant in terms of access. So that's about accessibility.
So the people that live in these, you know, it says at 5.2, the gates provide a benefit to a very small selection of residents, right? So namely, this is our elderly residents that live in those complexes for that reason, you know, and I don't know anybody in Thurrock that would go, actually, this shouldn't be paid for out of the HRA. I think that most residents, if you not canvassed and done a consultation with our residents and said, do you think that the HRA should pay for these gates? The residents will say, of course, our residents should be kept safe. I can't agree that these are coming out, considering, and I'm sorry, Joy, and I know it's your baby, but you know, what percentage of people rent a garage? But it's coming out of our HRA money. And there is a very, very small percentage. Private people rent out garages. You know, the percentage of people that actually want to, we know that people don't even put their cars in a garage, but we're still doing up. Nobody puts a car in a garage. They put their boot cells in the garage. But we can't protect our old people, but we can spend money on garages. And for that reason, I will never agree that you should be taking these gates away. I think it's upside down ways about doing your budget.
What I will say about garages, though, is that the garages are rent out for a profit.
Yeah, but we don't make a profit. They make a loss. We're spending £500,000 a year on doing these garages up, Luke. That's madness, but we can't pay 90k for our old residents.
But when we spend that money on those garages will turn over a profit, and so there's not a cost there because we're making money on that. That's an investment that makes money. So this is more of a choice. It is a choice. Well, we have to spend. So although again, I agree with you know with you. That I understand the point you're making, but I don't think the garages is a good example in this case, because that's an investment that will make us money, not a spend that we won't get back, that we will have to then not spend on something else. But I'm talking for the officer here, aren't I? I shouldn't be doing this, should I? Go for it, Karen.
And I don't mean to pick on the garages, but I'm just trying to say that it's about representation in percentages. And they're saying in the report only a small amount of residents, it's only a small percentage of people that would be benefiting from it. Well, I don't care that it's a small amount of percentages. If those people don't have you've got the one in Aveley, you've already got that's plastered all over social media, that as soon as those gates go there, the school opposite will be in them. The same with the one that Victoria's on about tonight. Straight in there. I'm glad, you know, I know we've got the report about Alexander. If you'd have took that gate away, you'd have all of the Lansdowne parents there, because there is parking restrictions around all of these areas. So where they're going to go, straight through there and park in there. And then again, that leaves these residents vulnerable, worried. They're frightened to say no. They're old age pensioners. It's quite a passionate area, I think.
Does either Carol or Roger want to answer that?
No, I'm going to say the recommendation at the moment is that the service charge be introduced for the rookery. That not everyone will pay that, because it'll be the housing benefit or universal credit will pick that up. We will certainly take these points back that have been very genuinely, very passionately by members of Scrutiny Committee, and we will discuss this further with the portfolio holder when we make the final decision. I don't think I can add any more information than I have done already.
Brilliant. So if we go to Joy now.
I don't mind you all getting at me because of the garages. I really don't.
Not personal, Joy. It's not.
No, not lovely. I know. Carol knows. I would rather see all the garages come down. You know, because the garages aren't fit for purpose anymore. And as you said, most of them are not got cars in them anymore. You know, they're probably inflammable stuff inside that would go up in a minute. But we are, as Carol would probably say, we are taking some of the really worst garages down and trying to put social housing on them.
Yeah,
so that is a good point, because
it is good. Yeah, definitely.
Garages, especially in Aveley and South Ockenden, where there are garages that are really in a bad state of repair, and I would rather see them come down. You know, in some areas we probably could take garages down and put parking places in there. You know,
yeah.
But as Carol said, people want garages, and Luke's right in a way, while the want is there for people to rent them, we are getting money in for those garages, which should actually go back to make them better than they are now, because they are in a very bad state of repair. Nothing's been done on garages for years, you know. But I can understand where you're coming from. I mean, perhaps Roger will take this back. Have we looked at some of the firms out there who may do these garages, may do these fencing for us and put an advert on? So they've done it. If we've only got 4, Carol, is it not possible to go to a firm who may say, oh, we'll put those fences up, but we'll put our advert on front? Give us some, you know, comeback. There's lots of options we could look at. I think we're just looking at, it's going to cost 90 grand. And we probably, if we give up something on garages, we probably could afford it. But if we're only talking about 4, I'd be looking at other ways. And I'm a raiser of money. You know, I will raise money, whatever. And I've done it all my life. So I think we should perhaps Roger and you can take this back and see if there are any firms that will come in and say, yes, we'll do 1 gate each. And it may be an answer to the problems, you know. I think we've got to look at a few options and not just go across the board and say we can't do it because we've got to do something else. And there are decisions that have to be made, and it won't agree with it. We all can't agree, whatever. And we want our best for our elderly people. Of course we do. We want them to be saved. And I know places that are not even on there. The gates have just been left open for years. They've never been closed. Carol, if gates are ever put on there, are they electric gates or do they have to be shut by a person?
Automatic.
In this report, we're only talking about electronic gates that move, that have sensors and move electronically. And some people have asked if we could have them shut by people, but clearly we're talking about changing the openings of the blocks because people can't push the doors open, so they definitely won't be able to move. The gates are very heavy.
Understandable, but you know, perhaps that is an option. Perhaps we ought to look at that. If we've really not got the money in our budget, perhaps we ought to be looking outside for funding, for firms to come forward and say, we'll do that gate, but we'll stick our advert on it. And I can't see a problem with that. You know, we've done.
We did it for roundabouts.
We did it, yes, we did it, and I was the one that started that. And I've got a big portfolio for that. We never carried on with that either. You know, so that is something that we've still got people advertising on that, and not even in Thurrock anymore. So it's that's something I've brought up already. So, but
can I
we've got to look at another option. You know, sorry, Luke, don't mean to go on, love.
That's all right. Can I just ask Wendy, because Wendy's not been there to poke me in the ribs like she normally does when we're running close to time, and I need that, like literally her elbow just sticking out. So are we okay? I'd like to, I mean, we're running a little bit late. I'd like to extend.
Yes, please.
Make sure that we finish this. I think we're running pretty good time. So, and we shouldn't be too late. So if we, does everyone agree for an extension? Yeah.
Yeah. Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed. Yeah.
Cool, good stuff. Councillor Abbas.
Thank you for the report, and thank you. Obviously, a lot of has been said on this, you know. So obviously, if these gates were left broken and unrepaired, so this in itself is a failure, you know. Obviously, if gates are there, you know, so they should have been a budget for all these years. So if they have been left there, so there is not an excuse to remove these gates because those were unrepaired for so many years. And you can just see by this consultation, people are even willing to pay money to keep these gates. And these gates are for security. These are not a gate to protect, like those are parking zone, as it has been said, because parking zones has been said. So we need to clarify these gates are not to protect or to do kind of parking. These are gates to protect these old residents.
Okay. So I'll just emphasize what we said earlier. So the whole gates program has been driven by two things. First of all, the new regulations, which means that we have to get a higher compliancy to the level of gates, and also looking at what genuinely adds security for the budget that's available. We will take all of these points back that have been raised also around sponsorship, looking at the charging again. We have obviously done quite an extensive consultation. That isn't complete yet, but we'll take all of these points back before final decision is made.
Did you want to follow that up?
Can I just come back?
Thank you, Chair.
Quickly.
Can I just go to Councillor Baker first?
Yeah.
And then yourself. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question for Carol, please, if possible.
Yeah, go for it,
Chair,
Chris.
can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. A question for Carol, please, if possible.
Yeah, go on, Chris. We can hear you.
Carol, thank you. You stated earlier on that all residents regards to short complexes, been notified of the possible increase of because of the service charge for the security gates. Is that correct? All the complexes have been notified. Carol?
You're on mute. Carol. You're on mute.
No,
apologies, Councillor Baker, I was on mute. Sorry, everybody does it. It's important that everybody does it in a meeting. The complexes that have gates, with the exception of Alexandra Court, yes, and Benyon, because we haven't done that yet, but we are going to consult with Benyon.
That's what's thrown me off, because I've had chats with, I know a lot of guys that live in Benyon Court, okay, and they've all stated to me, well, not all of them, but a good few of them have stated to me they've not received nothing at all from the council.
No, they haven't yet. No.
The increase. Yeah. But I've got more to say with this. I know it's increase one thing, but can I just put to you what's been going on now recently? Do you mind? Because regards the security gates not working, or is it a wrong time to say it?
At Benyon.
Yeah.
Councillor Jeffries regularly corresponds with me about the gates at Benyon, yes, and we've had a number of meetings with the ward councillors too.
Right.
I think.
Have you had these complaints? What I'm going to read out to you?
No, I don't know until you read it out to me.
Yeah, sure thing. Okay. Obviously, if the gate's not working, okay, the main gates at the front obviously been wide open for a year, and the gate to the left as you walk into it, that's the pedestrian gate, it's been permanently locked for a year. So what residents have to do is the pedestrian gate is closed. They have to walk around and into the road to get onto the pavement. Well, a couple of guys there have almost been run down by fast driving vehicles whizzing around the corner. It's happened a couple of times apparently, according to the residents. Is that been addressed?
That hasn't been raised with me before, Councillor Baker. No, the ward councillors didn't raise that point with us, I'm afraid. So I can certainly look into that for you.
Yeah, if you get details of that. Sorry, Chris, if you get details of that and pass it to.
Okay, well, it's bad. Chair, it's bad. They just push this button a bit more. They get complaints of cold callers knocking on the door all times of the day. An elderly resident, I can carry on for a little while, that'll be quick, was charged £15 by a cold caller for a face mask. Is it charged 15 quid for that? I've got loads of complaints here. I don't understand why Councillor Johnson has not received what I've received complaints.
I don't know either. I haven't received what you've received, Councillor Baker, either. So if you'd like to forward all those things to me, then we can look into them.
Will do, Carol. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Did anyone else want to speak on that? We've got Councillor Redsell put a hand up.
Yeah, only on if Roger's going to take this back. I mean, we've got places like Port of Tilbury. We've got loads of people who wouldn't probably mind sponsoring things. So if we're going to take those sort of things back, we ought to look at any big companies that are out there. I know everybody's having trouble at the moment, but it's just the point of if we don't ask, we don't get. You know, so we'd just like to see that followed up. Thank you.
You're on mute, Chair.
Did anyone else want to speak on that?
Is it okay to just come back in, even though I'm not a committee member, Chair?
Go on, one more shot over across the bow. Go on.
No, it was just to say thank you for the committee's responses, really, especially Councillor Redsall's in, you know, agreeing that actually more can be done to have a look at this. I do understand it is difficult. It is about choices, as everyone said, but actually if more can be looked at, and just to say, you know, the disappointment for me in the consultation is that as councillors, we've made very clear that the site, and we've made clear about what the site is and the issues with the site. The consultation didn't really provide options. I don't feel as councillors we've been listened to. We're the ones that know the site. I did go in and speak to residents. I went in before lockdown happened during the summer when this was notified to give them letters which I collected, which they sent back to me. I included posted self-addressed envelopes, and they included them, and I've given them to Councillor Johnson. So I have also consulted my residents because it's important to do that. I'm not doing it because I just think in principle it's wrong. This is what my residents have told me, and I just don't think it's acceptable for that money. So I appreciate, you know, that if you can go away and this isn't agreed yet, to give my residents options that they don't have to pay this amount. And yeah, once again, thank you so much, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holloway. I've moved to my iPhone now, as my other one did die as predicted, and I think this one makes me look older, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, you look really old.
I look younger in the other one, I'm sure of it. Yeah,
22 in the other one.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I see Councillor Worrell's hand is up. Do you want to make one more comment, Lynn?
No, I think I've said enough. I think
that could have been said years ago. That could have been said years ago, couldn't it, Lynn?
I think I've said
not
enough.
Just tonight.
Yeah, I know.
So if we go to the recommendations on here, I
hold on a minute. We need to go through them, don't we? There's a lot of them.
So the first one is, well, I don't think everyone's going to agree with that, are they?
No.
No. So I mean, as you can see, there's mixed. There's a mixed view in the room on that one.
You are only asked to note it, Chair.
Yeah, we are being, and we're noting it, and we're commenting on it as well. Number two, we didn't really speak about the high-rise sites, did we? Has anyone got any opposition to the gates on any of the high-rise sites?
I would just, before we do that one then, you know, Fremantle House, I have to go over to the Pru over there, and it's already all parking permits around there. So why they got a gate? I can't park around there. I have to actually go into the Pru to go there. I can't park because it's already parking permits.
It's not one where we've pursued the parking options because as we have in Chadwell and Grays, as you're well aware, Councillor Worrell, there are lots of problems in Grays high rise about parking, and so the residents were very, very insistent that we sort out the parking around there. And also we've had in both Grays and Chadwell really serious issues raised with us by Essex County Fire and Rescue Service around residents and maybe others, I don't know, parking on the crosshatched areas which are reserved for emergency service vehicles. So we are introducing new control parking schemes in both of those areas, and they would have been here earlier if it hadn't been for the lockdown, to deal with the problems raised with us by the residents and by Essex County Fire and Rescue.
So they're going to keep the gates at Fremantle then?
Yes, unless we decide to move that into one integrated parking area.
Right.
So if we are all willing to note, I know we're not all in agreement,
Just
but
noting it, yeah.
we'll just note those 4 things, and we understand, how the decision making is going to go through. I just think that, just as a final thought, that I think we're going to have a lot of these discussions about in the future, especially how the way things are, about decisions that are suboptimal, that are not, we're not really happy about. And I think that it's good that we've had a good discussion tonight about this, because I think it's going to be, unfortunately, par for the course over the next couple of years, where we're going to be having a lot of tough decisions that we need to make. So I thank you for everyone's input on that report. You obviously, I can see you've been a willing viewer of this entire committee, Councillor Lowe. I think you're mad for doing it, but obviously, if you want to stay with us, you're more than welcome.
It's as interesting as it is, Chair. I might leave now if that's okay, because it's getting on.
Lightweight.
Thank you so much, and good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.
So let's move on to item 11, which I think should, fingers crossed.
So, Chair, can I just comment on these recommendations on item 10? So obviously, we have commented on this, and this is very sensitive topic. So will this report come back to us again, or will this go directly to the corporate director for approval?
It goes to the corporate director. It's a decision to be made by officers who will recommend a decision to the portfolio holder. It's not going to go to. I asked this question yesterday. This was pointed out to me yesterday. It's not going to go to cabinet, and it won't go to.
It's a portfolio decision.
Yeah, it's a portfolio decision. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So yeah, hopefully, I'm quite positive about the next report. So, so yeah, perhaps,
the last one. That's why.
Yeah,
I've got 2 more.
No, it's got enough. There's one more yet. So yeah, come on, let's have some nice positivity to
Carried away now.
Penultimate
It's the last one.
Go for it, guys.
Well, Chair, you're so positive about it. I'll get Ryan to do a brief introduction. Ryan.
Thank you, Chair. So presenting this report today for the sheltered housing decommissioning of the Alexandra Court complex in Tilbury. There's 40 properties at this complex overall, and the reason for the recommendation is twofold, really. Firstly, part of the project Carol mentioned earlier, there was assessments undertaken at all sheltered housing complexes about work that was required to bring them up to standards that the council was striving towards to ensure compliancy with the Equalities Act and to support people's independent living in sheltered housing complexes. The work that was identified at this complex would be extremely disruptive, extremely costly, and even if delivered, wouldn't result in the benefits being realised fully. Alongside that, there is a development happening a couple of 100 metres down the road at Calcutta Road for new happy homes that are being built there. And the two things put together means that there's an opportunity to look to decommission this site, and where appropriate, residents may be able to move to the new development. Alternatively, there's options to move to other sheltered housing complexes across the borough, wherever a resident would like to go to. We've spoken with all tenants at the complex now. We had dedicated sessions that were pre-booked, so they could have those either in person or over the phone by themselves, or with a next of kin or another person alongside them. And feedback on these proposals has been positive, strongly positive, I would say. Some people have already demonstrated a preference to possibly move to the new Calcutta Road development. Other people, not so much, but have indicated preference. Actually, they'd like to move elsewhere in the borough to be closer to friends or family in that case. So that is what this report sets out to present to you all. This would be a cabinet decision, so this will go forward to them to decide. The other element to share with you and raise with you is the introduction of a local lettings plan, therefore, for the new Calcutta Road development. Again, that's something that is decided within the service, ultimately put in place by the corporate director, but as part of consultation, it does come to this committee for your views. So the local lettings plan would be created to establish that residents moving from Calcutta, from the Alexandra Court complex, would have a priority to move to Calcutta Road. Residents that didn't want to would have an automatic band 1 priority on the housing register, so they would be supported to move to another sheltered housing complex wherever they would want to. That's all I'll say to introduce it, and if there's any questions, we have to answer them.
Brilliant, thank you very much for that. Well, as long as it does what it says on the tin, and there aren't any hiccups, this is exactly how regeneration should work, isn't it? Like, you know, you build something, and then you take a group of people out of dilapidated accommodation and move them into the new building without breaking up the community. I mean, if only we could do regen on that, you know, on larger scale across the HRA, like we'd be laughing. I mean, it's fantastic. You know, we've all been, I mean, I know we've been around Alexandra enough. We've all knocked those doors, and it is, you know, it's seen, you know, it's given us good service for many, many years, but it was past its sell-by date. And yeah, I'm delighted with this. And on that, I will, on a rare note of what was the term? Less vexed. It was just, I'm less vexed than normal. I'll pass on to Councillor Redstone.
You're younger already. I think it's a positive report. I feel a bit of deja vu here. We did this with Elizabeth House, with Elizabeth Gardens, you know, so and Rogers can go back as far as I can. So we had that with that, didn't we, Roger? So, and that worked out quite well. So if it happens with this, it probably can happen with others as well. So if it can all go through that easy, and people are not moving out of an area where they know, it is good for them, because as we know, you know, most really elderly people don't really like change. They worry about it, and if the transition is good for them, you know, then it's good for us. So it's a positive report. So really, thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, Councillor.
Brilliant. Has anyone else would like to make any comments about this?
Me.
Go.
Thank you. No, I think that this is a good report. I think this is something that we looked at when I was the portfolio holder, and then it didn't happen. So for some reason, but it's great, the idea of doing it. So I've got a few questions. So the remainder of the flats that will not go to, because people have chosen to go to Chadwell, Aveley, wherever it is that they're going to live. Will there be a local lettings plan? Because I've already been approached by people from Crown Court when I'm out walking the dog every morning, you know, and they're waiting for me to come to this meeting tonight. Will Tilbury residents living in other flats and houses then be able to apply for them under the local lettings? And why was it Alexander was that chosen above Crown Court? Because I'm going to need to answer that question when I'm out and about.
Okay, I'll do both of those. I'll try anyway. Okay. Why Alexandra, not Crown Court? For the first reason that Ryan outlined. Crown Court is much more amenable to the full refurbishment of kind of accessibility items that we talked about earlier. Alexandra is simply not. The way it's designed is very different to the way Crown Court is designed. And it's just really very hard to get the ramps to work the right way, to get the right doors with the right, it would be really difficult.
It's very tight.
it's very tight. I mean, it might involve demolishing bin stores and things, whereas at Crown, because of its very different design,
yeah, definitely,
it's much easier to do it there. And that's the answer to the first question. It's very simple. Crown lends itself to all those accessibility and what's the right word, improvements, and Alexandra really doesn't.
Okay.
Because of the nature, as you say, the nature.
Yeah, I thought that would be it, but I did promise to ask.
Okay.
And they're probably watching, so I really needed to ask.
Okay, that's fine. So that's the answer to that one. On the local lettings plan, there will what we know won't be let to people who live in Alexandra is the 4 2-bedroom flats at the development in Calcutta Road. So we need to think about actually how many people across the borough are waiting for 2-bedroom sheltered housing type flats, and see whether like the bungalows at Claudian, whether that's actually something that should go to people across the borough who have that need, rather than just people in the local area. If there are any 1-bedroom flats that are left over after everybody from Alexandra Court decides whether they want to go there or not, then that would probably be more, I would say, just thinking off the top of my head, because we haven't really talked about it any further than the people in Alexandra going there, but that would probably be along the similar lines to the sort of local lettings plan for Alma Court, in which you draw, you know, we could look at all the sheltered housing complexes in Tilbury, for example, something like that, where you sort of draw a boundary around things and say the people who qualify within this area would then have the priority.
Okay.
But I don't know. It might that. It's very different doing that, where the vast bulk of it is probably going to go to one set group of people, and then there won't be, I don't imagine there'll be very many left over.
No.
So that I wouldn't want to raise people's hopes in Crown Court of all being able to move to Beaconsfield Place, I believe it's going to be called, on Calcutta Road.
Yeah,
because I don't, at this point, we really don't know what's going to happen. But my anticipation is at this point that most of the residents from Alexandra will go to Calcutta, but some of them will go elsewhere in the borough. Some of them have already expressed a preference to move to be close to family in other parts of the borough.
Okay, I've got 2 other questions, Luke. Could I ask them, please? The first
yes, you
one,
can, yeah.
Thank you very much. The first one is that when you decommission the flats as sheltered accommodation, Alexander, that you're going to use it to put people in there that are homeless, yeah?
In the interim, yes.
In the interim. Will you do that when it's completely empty? I just don't see the 2
block by
marrying up very well if you try to put people in there.
So when you won't mix in the same blocks, it's all blocks of 4 1-beds. That's how Alexandra's made up. We won't mix homeless families and sheltered housing residents in a block, but we won't wait until the whole site is empty in order to start housing when a block is empty. So we won't mix them in a block, but block by block.
I think you might have a little bit of a few problems over there, but you know, you'll need to deal with that as it comes along. And also,
Councillor Worrell, as you're always telling me,
I know my homeless people need to be housed. They do. They absolutely do. They absolutely do. But this is just sheltered accommodation, and some of them people, you know, I just think it's about mixing people. And the other one was, when you're building, the housing register shows that we need 2 beds.
Yes.
You know, rather. So, will we be building 2 beds in this? I see it said family-sized homes. You know, but we're desperate for 2 beds, and you could get more accommodation on there if we was building 2 beds.
I think in all sites you have to have a balance and a mix of properties. Ryan's actually put together a sort of memoir for the planning department as to when they're agreeing affordable housing under a section 106 or looking at our own planning applications, the percentage of each size that we need. So we do need 2 beds, but we do also need 3 beds and some 4 beds, and we do need some 1 beds as well.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
Who are not of a sheltered housing age, who need to have a 1-bedroom flat. So it's also important to not have all the same kind of type of families all on the same place, because it can get very full up of children, particularly if you move everybody in all at the same time.
Okay, but other than that, I've just think, other than the mixing them at the wrong time, considering they're all on top of each other, that's why we're decommissioning them. And then, you know, so I just would, you know, just be very, very wary about, you know, the mixing them at the wrong time.
Hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Thanks
for that, Lynn. If we can, I don't think there's any other hands up. So if we, and I'm obviously aware of the time. If we, do we all agree that we've noted and happy to that we've commented on these proposals? Yeah.
Yeah.
All good.
No.
Great.
Right, start, so if we move on to item 12, which is a little bit earlier than I thought, I'll be honest.
Yeah, we said half-10, didn't we?
Not too bad, is it? So,
I've got a very strange idea of what not too bad is.
We're coming home after, are we? So there's a plus.
Yeah. I mean, you weren't there when I was chair before. I could squeeze any meeting out to 9:30. I was shocking. I really was.
That very well.
No, I thankfully missed
You could have one item on the agenda and be running late. So yeah,
it's got to be a change from television, hasn't it? So
I suppose
we've
so.
saved on that.
The Bake Off's on. I could have been watching the Bake Off.
And Jungle.
I've stopped someone watching endless episodes of The Crown in the lounge as well. It's the first time the telly hasn't had The Crown on for at least 4 days.
I haven't started it yet. I'm frightened to watch it.
Yeah, move on, please.
So this report is one that you asked for, Chair, so that's why it is on the agenda.
Go for it. Basically, you need to tell us that everything is still the shop's in order and nothing's falling apart at the seams. Go for it.
Ryan, would you like to tell the chair that the shop's in order and nothing's falling apart at the seams?
I would like to say that. Yes. No, thank you, Chair. So, as requested, and in keeping with the theme of the last couple of meetings with COVID-related updates in the housing service, this is the housing service COVID-19 financial update. It is split into the 2 sections, as you'd expect, for the Housing General Fund and the Housing Revenue Account. The Housing General Fund has seen some pressures, as you would expect through everyone in. You know, the service is doing things that it has not been asked to do before, but is managing. There has been some additional funding and allocation to the Housing General Fund from the overall council's allocation of the COVID-19 support fund. There is a great deal of detail in here that I won't go through, but the report has provided it. From a housing revenue account perspective, I would say the private sector housing team as well. We heard from Dalal earlier on about the challenges they've faced with not being able to go out and undertake inspections. So that has had an impact, but there is a route to income loss compensation that is being explored to make up for some of that. From a housing revenue account perspective, the performance for the rents and welfare team has been particularly strong given the challenges that have been faced. At the last check of performance, the team were ahead of their profile target, of which again, given the challenges, is very, very good performance. The work for the financial inclusion officers within the team has also been stellar. They've really been supporting people and generated even 35% more income than they did in the same period last year. So again, very, very strong performance there. So all in all, I would say yes, it is a positive update to be able to give, given the challenges that have been faced.
What's your biggest worry going forward that's COVID related from a housing perspective?
I would say I had more worries before the Chancellor extended the furlough to March, and the government effectively banned evictions until after Christmas and possibly realistically until the end of March. So my concerns were about more people coming off furlough, losing their jobs, going on universal credit, and therefore finding the problem that all people who go onto universal credit find, which is the difficulty of meeting those first 5 weeks whilst you're waiting for your claim to come through. That isn't going to materialise yet, because clearly a lot more people are on furlough, and furlough's been extended to the end of March. My other concern was, and has been all year, and it's been put off and put off and put off, so now I think it's probably been pushed into the next financial year, is in the private rented sector. We know that there are landlords out there who want to evict their tenants, and that may be for entirely legitimate reasons or reasons that we wouldn't feel were entirely legitimate ourselves. But they cannot, because you can't get an eviction through the courts, and there are no evictions now until the 11th of January. The Secretary of State's made that very clear. So I think that problem of that sort of low turnover and issues with people have served Section 21 notices or they have served Section 8 notices, that is all now pushed into the next financial year. So that's my major concern, is that we will see a rise in private sector evictions in the next financial year, and that will lead to an increase in approaches to the homelessness service and possibly a pressure. Well, if that happens, then there will be a pressure on the temporary accommodation budget in the next financial year. So those were, I mean, I'm not so worried about the first one now, because the furlough's been extended for our own, in terms of our own tenants, but I'm continue to be concerned about what's going to happen in either at the end of this financial year or very much in the next financial year in terms of the private sector.
Okay, thanks very much for that. Councillor Worrell.
Could I have an update about how many people we've still got in bed and breakfast, and are we able to contain them now and bring any back that we've got out at other boroughs?
Ryan, can you do that? You look like you're looking for the numbers.
I am. I am just finding it now. I asked the question. I have a total breakdown of temporary accommodation. I haven't got a direct breakdown of those that are in nightly lets compared to those in furnished temporary accommodation lets. So I can provide some greater clarity after this meeting to you, Councillor Worrell.
I mean, it's always our aim to get people back in. Well, A, to not have people in bed and breakfast for very long at all, and B, to get people back into the borough if they're outside the borough. That's always our aim. I mean, the other side of the private sector issue and nobody being evicted is that there is very little turnover, and so there's very little availability. So it is proving quite difficult to move people into the private rented sector, and because there is not that availability out there for us, or for anybody really.
So the ones that are in the bed and breakfast place, there's
in the hotel.
In the hotel, that
there's
are
about
getting
6 of them, yeah.
Yeah, and they're still getting like the daily food, and and I see on the social media that people are still cooking, chili con carnes one night, and somebody else is doing shepherd's pie another night and delivering it to them.
Yes,
so are they the same ones? Have they been in there? Are they the same ones, and they're still there from March?
Some of them probably are, yes. Some of them are not. So a number of people have moved out, and we've had to pick up new people who we found sleeping rough or whatever. So a lot of the people who came in originally, we have moved them on, but we have picked up new people as well.
Okay.
But we do want to move people out of there.
Oh, of course we
and
do.
a number of the people who are in there have been made offers already.
And can I just ask, the money that we've had from the government that's come into the council, is that enough money that's been given to the homeless team to cover the hole in the budget?
I'm going to leave that to Mike to answer, or Roger to answer. Roger.
Yes is the answer.
Right, okay.
All right. There's a long answer, but the short answer is yes.
Okay. You want to go, don't you, Roger?
Oh, no, hey. I don't need to give you a longer answer. Yes will do.
Okay. All right then. I'll ask it again next month.
Yeah.
Has anyone else got any other comments, or are we all?
No.
We're all commenting?
No.
No.
Right. Well, I was in a meeting very recently where they managed to, and I was joking with the chair, they managed to make the work programme section of the report last about 45 minutes. I kid you not.
Let's talk about the work programme, Lou. Let's talk about it.
That was Lower Thames Crossing. Councillor Massey got some. Councillor Massey got some absolute grief from me. He really did.
Go now.
But is there anything? Is there anything that anyone wants to add to our next meeting? Since we've proved we can do 8 reports so easily tonight.
No, because that could be even shorter, Luke.
Yeah, and stuff appears and comes on. But I tell you what, I would like to see come back. You know that one, the housing report about. I'd like to see what happens next to TRL and the private sector partnerships and how we're going to move that forward. I think that was a report that really, showed us a lot more than we've been able to have in the last year. So I'd kind of like an update on where that is, because TRL is going to corporate very soon. So can we have something come back, and whether it's public financing and all the different ways of like setting it up? I think that report needs probably not January, maybe March.
That's holding, don't you? We go back too far.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
There's an item on the housing development update in January, so I don't think it'd be any problem to
add that in,
incorporate it within that one.
Yeah. And will we have a movement on TRL by then, do you think, Roger?
I think there's still some further discussions we need to have. I'm aware that it sits under Andy, not me, but there are some positive discussions we're having. So hopefully we'll have an update by January. Yes.
Okay. All right then. So yeah, maybe if we can incorporate that in there, that will sort of satisfy that.
Yeah. I'm volunteering other people's report.
Yeah, but, that's fine. That's fine. You leave them all with loads of work when you leave, Roger.
Brilliant. So. Can I just?
No,
sorry.
It's been good tonight. It's been there's been no arguments, nothing. It's been good, togetherness. A good debate, definitely. I've enjoyed it tonight, to be honest. I do want to go to sleep, but.
Can I just clarify that Roger's definitely going to be at the next meeting?
I will be at the next meeting. Yes.
Because I haven't written the speech yet. So. And it's going to take, for a speech that special, it's going to take longer than January.
Make sure you don't add nothing on.
No, that's fine. No. So should we just cut all the reports out of January?
Let's just talk.
And just like have a tribute to Roger Harris. But no, thank you very much,
this meeting
guys.
is coming to an end, Chair.
This meeting has ended, Roger. It has ended. Okay.
Yeah,
No, we have to. But thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Have a good evening. What's left of it?
Bye. Bye. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, Chair. Bye-bye.
Wendy.
Yes.
Can you stay online when everybody else is off, please?